The trolley problem. You're standing beside a railway track. In the distance, a trolley is speeding toward 5 people tied to the rails. They cannot move. And if nothing changes, they will be hit. But just beside you, there's a lever. If you pull it, the trolley will switch to a side track. On that track, however, there's one person. They too cannot move. If you pull the lever, you save 5 people, but 1 will die. If you do nothing, 5 die, and the 1 lives. What would you do? This is the trolley problem. One of the most famous thought experiments in moral philosophy. It seems simple. Numbers alone suggest an answer. 5 lives are worth more than 1, but the simplicity dissolves the moment you consider what it really means to act. To pull the lever is to choose to kill someone, even if your intent is to save more lives. To do nothing is to let fate decide, but it means letting 5 people die when you could have intervened. You're not just moving a lever, you're deciding who lives and who doesn't. Philosophers call this a clash between utilitarianism and deontology. The utilitarian says, do the most good for the most people. The numbers matter. 5 is better than 1, but the deontologist argues that some actions are always wrong, no matter the outcome. Killing an innocent person, even to save 5, is still morally wrong. And you stand at the switch, heart racing. What matters more? What you cause, or what you prevent? You imagine faces, the 5, frightened, the 1 unaware. What if that 1 is your friend, your child? Does that change everything? Should it? There's no clear answer. That's the power of the trolley problem. It doesn't tell you what to do. It asks you to sit with the weight of choosing. As you drift into thought, the track fades. The steel rails blur into silence. You're left with a question, not an answer. And maybe that's the point. Not to solve the problem, but to awaken something within you. A gentle discomfort, a curiosity, a whisper of conscience. You're no longer beside the track. You're beside yourself, watching, wondering. Would you pull the lever? The experience machine. Imagine a machine, a perfect illusion. Once inside, you'd feel only joy, success, love, and pleasure. It would simulate the most fulfilling life you could ever imagine. You would not know it's fake. The experiences would feel just as real as any in the outside world. This is the experience machine, a thought experiment proposed by philosopher Robert Nozick. He asked, if such a machine existed, would you choose to plug in for a day, a year, a lifetime? You pause to consider it. Inside the machine, there is no pain, no heartbreak, no regret. You're a famous artist, a beloved partner, a genius. You experience deep beauty, endless joy, and total achievement. Everything you've ever wanted is possible, instantly, and yet something feels missing. If the life inside the machine is not real, does it matter that it feels good? You begin to sense what Nozick was pointing to. He believed that we value more than just pleasure, that we want to do things, not merely experience them. We want our actions to matter. We want our relationships to be with real people, not simulations. We want to become someone, not just feel like someone. In the machine you would never struggle, but maybe struggle gives life meaning. Maybe pain makes joy real. You imagine yourself reaching toward the plug. Could you live with the knowledge that everything, every hug, every success, every love, is a lie? Or would you rather live in a world of imperfection, where things hurt, but mean something? There's no judgment here, no right or wrong, only a question, quiet, persistent. What do you truly want from life? Is it happiness, or is it truth? As you drift deeper into thought, the machine hums softly in the background of your mind. It tempts you with comfort, with ease, with perfection, but you are still outside of it. You haven't plugged in, not yet. You rest in the tension, the desire for joy, the yearning for meaning, and the sense that perhaps they are not always the same thing. Nozick's machine fades from view, but its question lingers. Would you plug in? The ship of Theseus. Picture a ship anchored in the harbor. It once belonged to the ancient hero, Theseus. Over time, its wooden planks begin to rot. Slowly, one by one, each piece is replaced. A new plank here, a beam there. After many years, none of the original wood remains. Yet the ship still floats, still bears the name of Theseus. Is it still the same ship? This is the paradox of identity known as the ship of Theseus. It asks a quiet but profound question. When something changes gradually, piece by piece, does it remain what it was? Now, imagine something else. Suppose every discarded plank, every original piece of the ship, is gathered and reassembled elsewhere. That version now contains all the original materials. So which is the real ship of Theseus? The one rebuilt over time, or the one reconstructed from the old parts? You begin to feel the layers of the question. It's not really about ships, it's about you. You were once a child. Since then, your body has changed, your cells replaced, your thoughts have shifted. You've forgotten some things, learned new ones. Self, the person you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, is mostly gone. And yet, here you are, still you. So what makes something itself? Is it the parts, the memories, the form, the function, or is it the continuity, the unbroken story, over time? Some say identity lies in memory. Others say it lies in function, or purpose. Still others say identity is an illusion, a comfort we cling to as everything around us changes. You sit with the thought. Slowly, gently, the ship drifts through your imagination, its wood creaking softly, water lapping at its sides. Sib, you realize you are not unlike that ship, rebuilding, rethinking, rebecoming. And maybe identity isn't fixed. Maybe it's a process, not a destination. A river, not a rock. You breathe slowly. The harbor is still. The ship glides through your mind, quiet and whole. And the question remains, gentle and unresolved. If everything changes, what makes you you? Plato's allegory of the cave. Imagine you've spent your entire life inside a dark cave. You were born there. You're chained, facing a wall, unable to turn your head. Behind you is a fire. Between the fire and your back, figures pass by, unseen, but their shadows stretch across the wall in front of you. You watch them every day. They're all you've ever known. To you, the shadows are reality. This is Plato's allegory of the cave. It's not a story about a cave. It's a story about waking up. Now imagine one day your chains fall away. You stand, you turn around. For the first time you see the fire. Your eyes burn. It's too bright. You're afraid. And then someone leads you outside. At first the sunlight blinds you. The real world is strange. The colors too sharp. The trees too vivid. The truth too overwhelming. But slowly you begin to see. Not shadows, but objects. Not echoes, but voices. You see the world as it is, not as it was shown to you. You begin to understand the cave was never the truth, only a reflection. And now, you want to return, to tell the others. But they won't believe you. They've never left. To them, the shadows are still real. They think you're confused, delusional, maybe even dangerous. Plato believed most of us live like cave dwellers, accepting what we're told, what we see, without ever questioning what's behind it. The allegory is about ignorance and enlightenment, about how hard it is to leave comfort for truth, how painful it is to learn, and how lonely it can be to know more than others want to hear. You sit with the image, a cave, a shadow, a man blinking into the light. Maybe you've had your own moments outside the cave, a new idea, a sudden realization, a truth that unsettled you. And maybe, like the freed prisoner, you found it hard to go back. You close your eyes. The cave is quiet, but now you're no longer trapped. You've turned around. You've seen the fire. You've glimpsed the sun. And once you've seen it, even for a moment, you can never forget it. Socrates and the unexamined life. You're sitting in a quiet courtyard. in ancient Athens. The air is warm, the streets are narrow, and across from you is a man in plain robes, barefoot, weathered, calm. His name is Socrates. He asks questions, not to prove you wrong, but to awaken you. Each answer you give, he gently challenges. Why? He asks. How do you know? You begin to feel uncertain, not because he is cruel, but because he is precise. His words strip away assumptions. You find yourself questioning things you thought were solid. What is justice? What is love? What is a good life? This is the method of Socrates, not to teach, but to lead you inward. He once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." It's a bold claim, and it cost him his life. When Athens condemned him for corrupting the youth and questioning the gods, he did not beg for mercy. He drank the poison himself, quietly, willingly. He believed that to stop questioning, to live blindly, was a kind of spiritual death, far worse than the physical one he faced. You reflect on this. Most people move through life without slowing down. We chase goals, follow routines, accept beliefs we've inherited. Rarely do we pause to ask, why am I doing this? What do I truly believe? Socrates reminds you that philosophy isn't a subject, it's a way of living, a daily practice. Not of answers, but of honest questions. It's uncomfortable, but it's freeing. You imagine your own life, not as a script, but as an open inquiry. You examine your choices, your fears, your hopes, not to judge, but to understand. The examined life isn't perfect. It doesn't mean you always know what's right. It means you care enough to look inward, to listen, to grow. Socrates fades into the night. The courtyard quiets, but his voice echoes in your mind. Not loud, but persistent. Know thyself. And so you sit with yourself, not chasing sleep, not fearing the silence, but simply examining. And in that quiet act, you live a little more deeply than before. The ring of Gyges. You're walking across a quiet field after a storm. The earth is soft beneath your feet. The clouds are breaking, and then you see something glinting in the soil. You kneel down, brush the dirt away, and find a golden ring. You slip it on, and suddenly, no one can see you. Not just invisible in body, but untouchable by consequence. Your words, your actions, unseen, unpunished. You could steal without being caught, lie without being challenged, even kill and vanish without a trace. What would you do? This is the story of the Ring of Gyges, told by Plato in the Republic. Gyges, a humble shepherd, discovers a ring that makes him invisible. He uses it to seduce the queen, murder the king, and take the throne. All because he could, all because no one was watching. Plato's question is simple but disturbing. Would anyone act justly if they could get away with injustice? You sit with that thought. Do we behave morally because we are moral, or because we're afraid of being seen? What happens to our ethics when the fear of judgment is removed? It's a test of character, but also a window into society. Laws, rules, expectations, they all rely on visibility, surveillance, accountability. But deep down, who are you when no one's looking? You imagine wearing the ring. You walk through stores, offices, homes. You could take, you could deceive. No alarms would sound, no eyes would catch you. But would you feel whole, or would you feel hollow? Is morality a performance, or is it a mirror? Some say virtue lies in action, others say it lies in intention. But Gyges forces you to ask, is goodness something you do for the world, or for yourself? The ring grows heavy on your hand, not physically, but philosophically. You realize that power without consequence is not just a test of what you can do, it's a test of who you really are. You slip the ring off, not because you must, but because you choose to. And in that quiet act of restraint, invisible to the world, you glimpse something noble, even when unseen. you still choose what's right. Pascal's wager. You're standing at the edge of a great unknown. Beyond it lies something vast, something silent, something you cannot see. Death, eternity, the divine, or perhaps nothing at all. You don't know. No one truly does. But the philosopher Blaise Pascal once suggested, what if life is a kind of wager? His idea, known as Pascal's wager, is simple in form but unsettling in depth. He argued that belief in God is not just a matter of evidence, but of risk. If God exists and you believe, the reward is infinite, eternal life, divine love, salvation. If you're wrong, and God does not exist, you lose very little, some time, some comfort. But if God does exist, and you do not believe, the loss is infinite. So, he reasoned, belief is the safer bet. You sit with that logic. You don't feel pressured, only intrigued. Is faith a gamble? Is doubt a risk? Pascal wasn't trying to scare. He was trying to shift the conversation from proof to prudence. You don't have to be certain. You only have to ask, what am I living for? What am I risking? But something in you hesitates. Can belief be chosen like a strategy? Can one simply decide to have faith for the sake of safety? Doesn't belief require sincerity, conviction? Pascal anticipated this. He said, begin with the habits. Act as if you believe. Pray, reflect, seek. Let the heart follow what the hands practice. It's not about manipulation. It's about openness. About choosing to live as if something greater might be true, and seeing where that path leads. You imagine belief not as a destination, but as a quiet willingness, a leaning toward hope. A wager, yes, but not on fear, on meaning. You breathe, you let the mystery remain. Pascal's wager doesn't demand that you resolve the universe. It only asks you to reflect on your life, and where you're placing your trust. And as you drift into sleep, you're not asked to decide, but simply to wonder, what do you wager your life upon? The dilemma of determinism. You sit quietly and think about your next move. Maybe you'll close your eyes. Maybe shift the blanket. Maybe you'll get up, walk, speak, or stay still. Whatever it is, it feels like a choice, a decision rising from within you. But what if it isn't? This is the heart of the dilemma of determinism. A problem that asks whether free will truly exists, or whether every action, every thought, every breath, is part of an unbreakable chain. The idea of determinism is simple. The universe follows cause and effect. Everything that happens has a reason, rooted in something that came before. The laws of physics, biology, chemistry, all moving forward like dominoes falling. If that's true, then your decisions were already written into the fabric of the cosmos long before you were born. You didn't choose your DNA. Your parents, your childhood, your culture, all those shaped your values, your thoughts, your desires. So when you choose coffee over tea, or silence over speaking, was that really you deciding? Or just the unfolding of causes beyond your control? It can be unsettling. You want to feel free. You want to believe you are the author of your life. But the more you look, the more mysterious your choices become. Yet, there is a middle path. Some philosophers say freedom doesn't require total independence from cause and effect. Instead, they say freedom means acting in alignment with your own nature, your values, your character, even if those were shaped by forces beyond you. This is called compatibilism, the belief that determinism and free will can coexist. You may not choose the cards you're dealt, but you choose how to play them, and that perhaps is freedom enough. You sit with the weight of the dilemma. You feel both pulled by the past and awake in the present, aware of how much is beyond your control, but still quietly responsible. You exhale. The moment is yours. Whether written or chosen, it is happening now. And maybe freedom isn't about breaking the chain. Maybe it's about seeing it, and still walking with grace. Locke's Prince and the Cobbler. Close your eyes, and imagine waking up in someone else's body. You look in the mirror and see a stranger. Rough hands, worn clothes, a crooked posture. But in your mind, you remember royalty, palaces, tutors, battles, crowns. You know you are a prince. And yet, everyone sees a poor cobbler. This is the thought experiment proposed by the philosopher John Locke. It asks, if the consciousness of a prince woke up in the body of a cobbler, who would he be? Would he still be the prince, or would he become the cobbler? Locke believed that personal identity doesn't come from the body, but from memory. The prince, now in the cobbler's form, remembers his past, his actions, his choices. And so, in a deep sense, he is still the prince, regardless of how he appears. It's not the face that matters. It's the story behind the eyes. You think about your own life. Who are you, truly? Your body has changed since childhood. Your hair, your hands, your walk. But your sense of self, that quiet stream of memory flowing behind your eyes, has remained. Or has it? What about the memories you've forgotten? The ones you've blurred or reshaped? If identity is built on memory, what happens when memory fades? Are you still the same person after illness, trauma, or time? Some say identity is continuity of consciousness, your awareness, your stream of thought. Others argue it's something deeper, something immaterial, a soul, a presence, something memory alone cannot explain. You lie back and reflect. Could you still be you in another form? Would your essence survive, even if your voice changed or your hands no longer looked the same? Perhaps Locke was inviting us to look past appearances, to find selfhood not in flesh, but in reflection. You are not your body. You are not even just your thoughts. You are something unfolding, something remembered and remade with each passing day. You imagine waking in another life, and quietly, you realize you would still reach for meaning, still search for love, still wonder who you are. And maybe that's what makes you you. The problem of evil. You sit in the quiet of night, and your mind drifts to an age-old question. Not one of logic, but of heartbreak, of confusion, of mystery. If there is a God, one who is all-powerful, all-knowing and all-good, then why does evil exist? This is known as the problem of evil, and it has haunted human thought for centuries. Earthquakes shatter cities. Children suffer from illness. Innocent people face cruelty. If God can stop this, and wants to, why doesn't he? The question strikes deep. It's not just philosophical, it's personal. We've all asked it in some way, in some moment of pain or loss. Some say evil exists because of free will, that love, morality, and growth require freedom, and freedom includes the power to hurt. Without choice, goodness would be hollow, a script, not a virtue. Others say suffering leads to greater goods, strength, compassion, humility. Perhaps pain has a place in the story, even if we don't understand it from where we sit. Still, some point to mystery, that God's perspective is infinite, while ours is painfully narrow. Like children who cry when medicine burns, we may not yet see the full purpose behind our wounds. And yet, others reject these answers. They ask, could an all-good being truly allow such horror? Does the sheer scale of suffering suggest a deeper silence? The problem of evil doesn't demand a solution. It resists resolution. It sits in the space between belief and doubt, between theology and tears. Some find comfort in faith, that God walks with us in suffering, even if he doesn't remove it. Others find strength in facing the world as it is, without appeal to a divine reason. You sit with the question, not to solve it, but to honor its weight. The stars are silent, the room is still, and in this stillness, you feel what many have felt before: confusion, sorrow, and a longing for peace. Maybe the point is not to answer the question once and for all, but to carry it with compassion, to do good, even when you don't understand why bad things happen, to bring light, even when the world feels dark. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. The veil of ignorance. Close your eyes and imagine a world not yet formed, a society waiting to be built, You and others stand outside it, beyond time, beyond identity. You're about to design the rules, laws, rights, privileges, punishments. But there's one condition. You don't know who you'll be in this world. You might be rich. You might be poor. You could be powerful or powerless. You might be born into safety or into suffering. You could be a woman or a man, disabled, ill, a refugee, or a ruler. You don't get to choose. This is philosopher John Rawls' veil of ignorance, a thought experiment designed to strip away bias. It asks, how would you build a just society if you had no idea where in it you'd end up? You begin to think differently. Would you design a world where healthcare depends on wealth, if you might be born sick and poor? Would you allow discrimination, if you might be the one excluded? Would you tolerate extreme inequality, if you might land at the bottom? From behind the veil, fairness becomes personal. You no longer defend privilege. You consider justice. Rawls believed that a fair society is one we would all agree to if we didn't know who we'd be within it. It's not about compassion. It's about rational self-interest, extended universally. You begin to see how powerful the veil is. It removes assumptions. It quiets self-interest. It reveals what you truly believe about fairness. Once the mask of advantage is gone, and it invites you to apply that lens to your real life, not from a place of guilt, but from a place of perspective. You ask, would I want to be treated this way? Would I want my children to grow up in this system if they had no protection? You open your eyes. The world is no longer theoretical. The veil is lifted, but its question remains. You see systems not as distant or abstract, but as personal, possible, changeable. And maybe the work of justice begins here, not with power, but with imagination, not with knowing who you are, but with remembering who you could have been. Descartes' evil demon. You sit quietly, eyes closed, and begin to question the world around you. What if everything you believe, your memories, your senses, your thoughts, has been carefully constructed to deceive you? Not by chance, but by design. This is the haunting idea introduced by the philosopher René Descartes, who imagined the existence of a powerful and cunning force, a malicious being, whose sole purpose is to mislead you. He called it the evil demon. This demon is not just a trickster. It is absolute in its deception. It could be feeding you an illusion so perfect, so consistent, that you would never suspect it. The world you see, the people you love, the logic you trust, all could be illusions projected into your mind, like shadows on a wall. Descartes asked, how can I be certain of anything? Not even mathematics is safe. What if 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4? But you've simply been made to believe it does. You feel the ground of certainty begin to slip. The senses lie. Dreams feel real. Memory fades. What then, if even reality cannot be trusted? But Descartes didn't stop at doubt. He went deeper. In the face of total deception, he discovered something that could not be denied. Even if an evil demon is deceiving you, you must exist in order to be deceived. Cogito, ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. This single truth became his foundation. He could doubt everything, except the fact that he was doubting. From this fragile foothold, Descartes began to rebuild knowledge, step by cautious step. You sit with this radical idea, not to fear it, but to feel it. You realize that questioning everything does not mean despair. It means clarity. It means beginning again from a place of honesty. And maybe, even without demons, there are illusions in your own life. Beliefs handed to you, assumptions never challenged, certainties never tested. Descartes teaches you that sometimes the only way to find truth is to burn away everything that isn't. In the darkness of doubt, a small light remains. You think, therefore, you are. The butterfly dream. You are floating, light as air, wings outstretched, soft and delicate. You flutter from flower to flower, carried by the wind. There is no worry, no identity, No time, only motion, only now. You are a butterfly. Then you wake. You are no longer flying. You are a man, lying in bed. A philosopher, a thinker. Your name is Zhuangzi. The dream fades, and the room returns. But a strange question lingers, one that stirs your soul. Was I a man dreaming? I was a butterfly. Or am I now a butterfly? Dreaming I am a man. This is Zhuangzi's butterfly dream, one of the most famous parables in ancient Chinese philosophy. It's not meant to be solved. It's meant to dissolve something, your certainty. You begin to wonder, what is the line between dream and reality? Both feel vivid, both hold emotion, sensation, meaning, yet we treat one as fiction and the other as fact. But how can you be sure? Maybe your waking life is another kind of dream, longer, more detailed, but just as fragile. Maybe your identity is no more fixed than that butterfly's path through the air. Zhuangzi didn't fear this uncertainty. He embraced it. To him, it revealed something beautiful, the fluidity of existence, the mystery of self, the illusion of separateness. In his philosophy, there is no rigid boundary between waking and dreaming, between life and death, between man and butterfly. There is only change, a dance of forms, rising and falling like breath. You begin to see the wisdom, not as confusion, but as freedom. If reality is not as solid as you thought, then maybe identity isn't either. Maybe you are not a fixed thing. You are becoming, moment to moment, drifting through experiences like wings through wind. And perhaps that's not frightening. Perhaps that's what it means to be alive. You close your eyes, and the dream returns. You're flying again, unafraid. The air is cool, the sky wide. You are weightless. And somewhere deep in the mystery, you understand, you are the butterfly, and the dreamer, and the space between. The Euthyphro dilemma. You're standing in the quiet courtyard of ancient Athens. Marble columns surround you. The air is still. Across from you stands Socrates, his gaze calm but piercing. Beside him is a man named Euthyphro, claiming to understand the nature of piety, of what is holy and good. Socrates leans forward and asks a question that will echo for centuries. Is something good because the gods love it, or do the gods love it because it is good? This is the Euthyphro dilemma, and it reaches into the very heart of morality. If something is good simply because God, or the gods, declare it so, then goodness becomes arbitrary. Mercy, justice, love, they're good only because a divine being says so. If that being said, cruelty was good, would it be? But if the gods love something because it is good, then goodness exists independently, higher than even divinity. And if so, then we must ask, what is this goodness, and how do we know it? The dilemma invites reflection. Is morality rooted in authority, or does it stand apart? For the believer, it challenges the idea that goodness comes only from divine command. For the skeptic, it raises the question, can moral truth exist without a higher source? You think of laws, commands, traditions. Are they good in themselves, or are they only followed because they come from power? You feel the ground shift under certainty. Some try to resolve the dilemma by saying that goodness and God are one, that God's nature is the good. But then we ask, can we know that nature? Do we still circle back to faith? Others turn inward. They say goodness is found in reason, in empathy, in shared humanity. But even then, what makes that good? The Euthyphro dilemma doesn't tell you what's right. It asks why you believe what you do. It separates obedience from understanding. You close your eyes, the marble fades. Socrates walks away, not with answers, but with another question trailing behind him like a shadow. You sit with it, not to resolve it, but to let it settle into your bones. Not everything true must be certain, and not every good must be commanded. The drunk driver problem. It's late at night. A man leaves a party, his mind clouded by alcohol. He gets behind the wheel of his car. The streets are quiet. The lights blur. He speeds through intersections, drifts across lanes, but no one gets hurt. He arrives home, unaware of how close he came to tragedy. He goes to sleep, never knowing that his choices placed lives in danger. Now imagine a second man, same party, same drinks, same decision. But this time, a child steps into the road. There's a screech, a scream, a silence. A life is lost. The question is this: are the two drivers equally guilty? This is known as the drunk driver problem, a moral thought experiment about responsibility, intention, and luck. Both men made the same choice to drive drunk. Their actions, risks, and disregard for others were identical, but the outcomes were worlds apart. One harmless, the other catastrophic. So, how should we judge them? One view says outcomes matter. Causing harm brings moral weight. The second driver must live with blood on his hands. Even if he didn't mean to kill, his choices ended a life. That matters. But another view focuses on intent. Both men acted recklessly. Both took the same moral risk. The only difference was luck, randomness. And if we blame people based on outcomes they couldn't control, are we being fair? This is the puzzle of moral luck. It challenges the idea that we can be judged only for what we choose, not what happens afterward. You think about your own life. The small risks you've taken, the close calls, the harm you might have caused, even without realizing. How much of morality is shaped by chance? You also think about justice. In court, one man might be jailed, the other sent home. But in the heart, in the soul, are they really so different? Philosophers disagree, but the problem remains. And maybe its purpose isn't to settle blame, but to awaken humility. You breathe slowly. The road is quiet now. The cars are still. And in that stillness you realize, sometimes what we avoid is not because we are good, but because we were lucky. The omnipotence paradox. You're sitting beneath a quiet sky, the stars flickering like questions. Your mind wanders upward towards something beyond all things. God, the infinite, the eternal source. And then a riddle drifts into your thoughts. Can an all-powerful being create a stone so heavy that even they cannot lift it? This is the omnipotence paradox. And at first it feels like a trick. But beneath its simplicity lies a deep question about the very nature of power, limits, and logic. If the being can't create the stone, then there's something they cannot do. That seems to make them not all-powerful. But if they can create the stone, and then can't lift it, again, they're limited. Either way, there's something they can't do. So, does omnipotence include the power to defeat itself? Some philosophers argue that true omnipotence doesn't mean the power to do the logically impossible. You can't make a square circle or a married bachelor, not because of weakness, but because these are contradictions, not real possibilities. Asking a being to create an unliftable stone is like asking for a soundless noise. Others say omnipotence must include even the absurd. After all, shouldn't a limitless being transcend logic itself? You sit with both views. Maybe power isn't about doing everything. Maybe it's about doing all that can be done, all that is meaningful, coherent, and real. But then you think deeper. Why are we drawn to paradoxes like this? Perhaps not to trap the divine, but to explore our own limits, to confront the boundaries of language, reason, and thought. We say all-powerful and assume we understand. But maybe such a concept is, by its nature, beyond us, beyond the rules we use to measure it. You gaze again at the stars. You realize that questions like this aren't meant to break faith, but to stretch it, not to weaken thought, but to widen it. The paradox doesn't resolve. It doesn't have to. It simply invites you to pause at the edge of understanding, to sit quietly in the presence of mystery. And sometimes, that's more powerful than answers. The no-exit room. Imagine a room. There are no windows, no mirrors, no way out. You are not alone. There are others, each absorbed in themselves, each watching you just as you watch them. There is no violence, no chains, only presence, silence, and time that stretches forever. This is the world of Jean-Paul Sartre's play No Exit, and the thought it leaves behind is simple, but chilling. Hell is other people, not because they harm you, not because they judge you outwardly, but because in their gaze you become a thing, you become fixed, defined, watched. You lose control over your identity. Sartre, an existentialist, believed that human beings are radically free. We create ourselves through action, through choice, but others freeze us. They see us as we were, or as they want us to be, not as we hope to become. You think of moments when you felt misunderstood, when someone labeled you, and you couldn't escape it, when you acted for the sake of an image, instead of your truth. That's the room, that's the trap. But the walls aren't real. The door in No Exit is never actually locked. What keeps the characters inside is their own refusal to be authentic, their clinging to lies, their fear of taking full responsibility for who they are. This is Sartre's deeper message. Freedom is terrifying. It means you can't blame your past, or your nature, or even other people. You are responsible for becoming yourself. So why stay in the room? Because sometimes it's easier to be watched than to be free. But there is hope. You can step out, not from the room, but from the illusion. You can stop performing. You can look at yourself, not through their eyes, but through your own. You sit quietly. The room is gone. There are no walls, no fixed roles, just you and your next breath and the choice to be. You are not what others say you are. You are what you choose to become. And in that moment, the door opens. The hedonic treadmill. You imagine yourself walking toward happiness. It's just ahead. More money, more time, a new house, a goal reached, a desire fulfilled. You press forward, certain that once you arrive, you'll rest. You'll finally feel content. But something strange happens. You reach the goal, and the feeling fades. The joy is real, but brief. Soon your mind resets. A new desire appears, a new hill to climb, and you begin walking again. This is the hedonic treadmill, a concept in philosophy and psychology that suggests human beings return to a baseline level of happiness, no matter what changes around them. You win the lottery. You adapt. You lose something precious. You adapt. You rise. You fall. But through it all, your emotional set point holds steady, quietly pulling you back. It feels unfair. Shouldn't good things make us lastingly happy? Shouldn't pain break us forever? But the mind is resilient, always recalibrating, always adjusting. What once amazed you becomes normal. What once hurt deeply becomes tolerable. And so you run, not on the ground, but on a treadmill of desire. Each step forward takes you nowhere. Every satisfaction fades into the next craving. You pause and reflect. Maybe this isn't a failure. Maybe it's a feature, a built-in ability to survive, to keep moving, to seek meaning again and again. But it also means that if you chase happiness only in external things, you'll never quite catch it. It's always just ahead, never here. Some philosophers suggest a different path. Instead of chasing joy, they say, cultivate gratitude. Focus not on what's missing, but on what already is. Instead of running, learn to stand still. Instead of seeking the next peak, appreciate the ground beneath you. You breathe deeply. The room is quiet. Nothing has changed, but somehow, everything feels softer. Maybe the treadmill isn't something you have to escape. Maybe it's something to step off from, if only for a moment. You don't need more to feel more. You need less movement, more presence. You are already here, and that is enough. The experience of qualia. You sit in stillness, a cup of tea warm in your hands. The scent rises, floral, faintly earthy. You take a sip. Heat spreads across your tongue. A subtle sweetness lingers. And for a moment, There is nothing but sensation. But how do you know this experience? And more importantly, how could anyone else? This is the mystery of qualia, the individual, subjective qualities of conscious experience. The redness of red, the taste of salt, the feeling of sunlight on skin. These aren't facts you can measure. They are what it's like to be you, and no one else can feel them exactly the same. You may describe the color blue, but your description is not the experience. You may explain how pain works in the body, but you cannot make someone feel it with words. Qualia are the textures of consciousness, silent, private, irreducible. This thought leads to a question that has puzzled philosophers for centuries. How can we understand consciousness if we can't share experience? Imagine a scientist who knows everything about the physics of color, light wavelengths, optics, brain responses, but she's never seen red herself. She's lived in a black and white room her entire life. The moment she steps outside and sees red for the first time, has she learned something new? Many say yes, because knowledge of facts is not the same as experience. The color, the taste, the ache, they're not just data, they are the soul of being. You realize how often you live within these private worlds. You can explain yourself, try to be understood, but there is always a boundary between your mind and another's. A quiet solitude. And yet, that very solitude is what makes experience sacred. Your pain, your wonder, your joy, they are yours in a way nothing else is. You are not a machine processing input. You are a being experiencing life. Not just thinking, but feeling. You sit quietly again. The tea has cooled, but the memory of warmth lingers. It's impossible to explain to someone what this moment feels like, but you don't need to, because you were here. And that's the miracle of qualia. Achilles and the tortoise. You picture a racetrack. The sun is warm, the ground is dry. At the starting line stands Achilles, the swiftest of all Greek warriors, strong, fast, confident. Beside him, much smaller, much slower, is a tortoise. To be fair, the tortoise is given a small head start. Achilles smiles. He knows he will win. He begins to run. But Zeno, the ancient philosopher, interrupts the race, not with a stop sign, but with a paradox. He says, before Achilles can catch the tortoise, he must first reach the point where the tortoise began. But by the time he arrives there, the tortoise has moved a bit farther, and when Achilles reaches that point, the tortoise has moved again, and again, and again. Zeno continues, if every distance can be divided into smaller parts, infinitely, then Achilles must complete an infinite number of tasks to catch the tortoise. And how can one finish infinity? You pause. It feels absurd. Of course Achilles will pass the tortoise. That's how races work. But the paradox lingers, quietly unsettling. This is the heart of Zeno's paradox of motion. It's not just about a race. It's about space, time, and how we understand motion. It challenges the idea that continuous things, like a runner's stride, can be broken into an infinite number of measurable pieces. If space is infinitely divisible, how can anything move at all? And if time is infinite in parts, how can a single second ever begin or end? Some say the paradox is solved with modern mathematics, using the concept of converging series. Yes, there are infinite steps, but their total length adds up to a finite distance. Achilles does pass the tortoise. The math works, and yet, something about the paradox still captures the imagination, because it touches on something deeper, the tension between what we know in motion and what we cannot fully explain in stillness. You reflect on how life sometimes feels like this race, always chasing, never quite arriving, always dividing time into smaller and smaller tasks. But maybe the point isn't to escape infinity. Maybe it's to realize that motion happens not in logic, but in being. You take a breath, and the race continues. Buridan's ass. Imagine a donkey, hungry and thirsty, standing perfectly equidistant between two identical piles of hay. the same size, the same smell, the same appeal. There is no difference between them at all, and so, the donkey starves. This is the strange tale behind Buridan's ass, a thought experiment from the Middle Ages, attributed to philosopher Jean Buridan. On the surface, it's absurd. How could the donkey not simply choose one? Why would it freeze, incapable of action? But underneath the simplicity lies a profound question about free will, rationality, and indecision. If a creature makes choices based solely on reason, and has no reason to prefer one option over the other, then what can motivate it to act? If two options are perfectly equal, what breaks the tie? You begin to reflect. How many times in your own life have you stood between two paths, equally appealing, equally risky? A job offer, a relationship, a city, a belief. You weighed the pros and cons, waited for clarity, and sometimes did nothing at all. Buridan's ass isn't just about donkeys. It's about us, and what it takes to move forward in the face of uncertainty. Some philosophers use this story to argue that free will must exist, because without it, without the power to choose beyond pure logic, we might freeze, like the donkey, whenever reason alone cannot guide us. Others say we always act for a reason, even if that reason is emotional, unconscious, or arbitrary. The donkey wouldn't starve. It would eventually lean one way, however slightly. Still, the image remains caught between two goods, paralyzed not by fear, but by balance. You begin to see that choice isn't always about finding the better option. Sometimes, it's about creating movement, about choosing something to break the stillness. The world rarely gives us perfect clarity, but action, however small, carries us forward. You exhale softly. The donkey, still and silent, fades into the distance. You are not a creature trapped by indecision. You are someone who can step, even when the path isn't lit. And sometimes, in choosing without knowing, you find your way. The problem of other minds. You're sitting across from someone you love. They're smiling. Their eyes are bright. They nod at your words, laugh at your jokes, reach out and touch your hand. Everything tells you they are present, real, aware, feeling. But how do you know? This is the quiet puzzle called the problem of other minds. It asks a deceptively simple question. How can you be certain that anyone else is conscious? You know your own thoughts. You hear your inner voice, feel your emotions. You experience your world from the inside. But everyone else, you only see their outside, their behavior, their words, their reactions. You can't peek inside their awareness. What if they're just acting, not out of malice or deceit, but because they are something less than conscious? What if they're like robots, complex, responsive, convincing, but empty within? It feels eerie, and yet, there's no way to test it. This is not paranoia. It's philosophy, a challenge to the assumption that others are like you, that behind their eyes is a world as rich and deep as your own. You might shrug it off. Of course they're conscious. But the philosopher must ask, on what grounds? You infer it from behavior, from empathy, from similarity. And most of the time, that's enough. But it remains unprovable. This thought, strange as it sounds, brings you closer to humility. It reminds you how mysterious people really are. Even those closest to you. You cannot enter another's mind. You can only listen, observe, believe. And maybe that's the point. Maybe other minds are not meant to be proven, but trusted. Not dissected, but respected. The problem does not solve. It invites compassion. Because if someone else's suffering is real, even if you can't feel it, you can choose to honor it. If someone else's joy is real, you can choose to celebrate it. You sit back and think of all the people you've passed by, spoken to, misunderstood, each one a world, each one thinking, remembering, dreaming, just like you. Or maybe not, but still, you choose to believe. And in that act of belief, something opens. You are no longer alone. Mary the color scientist. Imagine a woman named Mary. She lives in a room that is completely black and white. Every object, every surface, every book, shades of gray. She has never seen color. But Mary is brilliant. She is a scientist who studies color perception. She knows everything there is to know. Every fact about light wavelengths, every neurological process in the brain, every detail about how humans see red, blue, and green. She knows what color is, down to the last atom. Then one day, she steps outside her room. She sees a red apple, and for the first time in her life, Mary experiences the color red, not as a concept, not as data, but as sensation. And she realizes something. There was something she didn't know. This is the heart of Frank Jackson's thought experiment, known as Mary the color scientist. It raises a haunting question about the limits of knowledge. Can we know everything physical about an experience and still miss something essential? Mary had all the facts, but when she saw color, really saw it, she learned something new. She learned what it's like. This suggests that experience, the inner feeling, the richness of sensation, is something that cannot be fully captured by information. Philosophers call this qualia, the raw, personal feel of perception. What does this mean? It challenges the idea that the mind is just a machine, that if we understand the parts, we understand the whole. Mary shows us that knowledge about a thing is not the same as knowing what it's like to live it. You reflect on your own life. Pain, love, music, grief. You can describe them. You can study them. But the experience itself, the taste, the ache, the flood of feeling, resists explanation. And that's not a flaw. It's a wonder. Mary reminds us that consciousness is more than computation. It's mystery. It's presence. It's the quiet, private richness of simply being alive. You close your eyes. Colors bloom behind your lids, not as facts, but as feelings. And somewhere, in that silent glow, you understand. Some truths can't be told. They must be seen. The brain in a vat. You wake up and everything seems normal. The room, the air, your hands, the voice in your head that says, I'm here. But then a question whispers, what if none of this is real? What if your body doesn't exist? What if you are simply a brain in a vat, floating in fluid, wired to a supercomputer that feeds you sensations? Every sight, sound, taste, and memory carefully simulated, indistinguishable from reality. This is the chilling thought experiment known as the brain in a vat, a modern twist on Descartes' radical doubt. And like his evil demon, it asks, how can you trust your senses? If your experiences can be manufactured, if technology could one day create the illusion of life, then what makes this moment any more real than a dream? You sit with that question. Your hand moves. Your breath slows. The room remains, but certainty slips. Because the truth is, you can't prove you're not a brain in a vat. Any test you run could itself be part of the simulation. Any piece of evidence might be fake. Even your doubt could be programmed. It feels unsettling, but then something shifts. Maybe the point isn't to destroy your sense of reality, but to make you humble about it. To realize that much of what you know is built on trust, in your senses, your memory, your reason. You begin to see the real power of this thought experiment is not to make you paranoid. It's to make you curious. Curious about how you know what's real. Curious about how fragile your certainty truly is. And then something comforting emerges. Even if you were just a brain in a vat, the experiences you're having now, this calm, this breath, this awareness, they still feel real. They still shape you. They still matter. Reality, then, might not be about the source of sensations, but the depth of your attention to them. You smile softly, because whether your world is physical or simulated, you are still here, thinking. And that, perhaps, is enough. The problem of induction. You wake to sunlight. The sky is still blue. The coffee is still warm. The floor is still solid beneath your feet. The world behaves just as it did yesterday, and you expect it to continue. This is what we do without thinking. We assume the future will resemble the past. This is the quiet logic of induction. We see patterns and we trust them. The sun has risen every day of your life, so you believe it will rise tomorrow. You've never seen fire not burn, so you believe it always will. But philosopher David Hume asked a haunting question. What justifies that belief? Why should the past guarantee the future? This is the problem of induction. It exposes a strange crack in the foundation of knowledge. We believe the world is stable because it has been, but that belief itself is based on past experience. It's a circular trust. You've never seen gravity suddenly reverse, but does that mean it can't? You've never seen your reflection fail to appear, but do you know it always will? Science, logic, reason, all depend on induction. We test, observe, measure, but always we're assuming what worked before will work again. Hume wasn't trying to destroy knowledge. He was showing its limits. He wanted us to see that reason has edges, and beyond those edges is uncertainty. You reflect on your own life. You expect the people you love to stay. You expect your body to behave. You expect tomorrow to come. But none of it is promised. And that's not cause for fear. It's cause for awe. Because even though you can't prove the sun will rise, you greet it anyway. Even though you can't guarantee love will last, you give it freely. Even though the world may shift, you step into it each day. Induction is not certainty. It's trust. You sip your coffee. You feel the warmth in your hands, and you smile. Not because you know tomorrow will be the same, but because you've chosen to believe it might be. And maybe that quiet hope is what makes life beautiful. The Sorite's paradox. You see a small pile of sand, just a few grains. No one would call it a heap. Now you add one grain, still not a heap. Add another, and another. At some point, it must become a heap. But when? Which grain makes the difference? This is the heart of the Sorite's paradox, also known as the heap problem, a puzzle of vague boundaries and blurred definitions. It asks, how many small changes does it take to create something new? Or to put it differently, if removing a single grain doesn't turn a heap into a non-heap, then even removing them one by one should never make it disappear. But clearly, it does. You've seen this in life. When does a person become bald? When does someone become old? How many dollars make someone rich? One more, one less. Our language is full of soft edges, but our minds crave certainty. We want clean lines, clear transitions, but reality resists that. The Sorite's paradox reveals how fragile our categories are, and how much we rely on context, feeling, and shared understanding to make meaning. You begin to see that most of life is like this, not all at once, but grain by grain. You don't fall in love in a moment. You don't grow wiser in a day. You don't lose hope in a single breath. It all happens slowly, incrementally, until one day you look back and everything has changed. The paradox isn't just about logic. It's about identity, transformation, and how the smallest shifts shape us. It invites patience, because change is often invisible until it's complete. You think about the habits you've formed, the choices you've made, the thoughts you return to. Each one small, quiet, forgettable, but together they build a heap, a life, a self. You lie back and breathe. You don't need sharp answers tonight, just a softness around the edges, a respect for the gray, because even if you can't say when the sand becomes a heap, you know that it does. The Gettier problem. You've been told for centuries what knowledge is. To know something, you must believe it. It must be true, and you must have good reasons for believing it. That was the formula. Simple, neat, accepted, since Plato. Justified, true belief. Then, in 1963, a man named Edmund Gettier wrote a short paper that quietly shattered it. He told a story. A man named Smith is applying for a job. He has strong evidence that Jones will get the job. He overheard the boss say so, and he knows Jones has 10 coins in his pocket. Smith concludes, the man who will get the job has 10 coins in his pocket, and he's right. But here's the twist. Smith gets the job, not Jones, and by coincidence, Smith also has 10 coins in his pocket, though he didn't know it. So his belief is true, and it was justified. But somehow, it doesn't feel like knowledge. This is the Gettier problem, and it changed the landscape of epistemology. It revealed that even if a belief is justified and true, it might still be right by accident. And when it's right by accident, we hesitate to call it knowledge. You begin to feel the crack in certainty. How often do you believe something that turns out to be true, but for the wrong reasons? You might guess an answer on a test and get it right. Believe someone is honest for reasons that aren't. Trust your gut and succeed, even though your logic was flawed. Is that knowledge? The Gettier problem shows that knowledge isn't just about getting it right. It's about how and why you get there. It asks us to look deeper, to consider the structure beneath our beliefs. You reflect on the things you know right now. How many are built on assumptions, on coincidences, on partial truths that feel whole? And you realize being right is not enough. Truth requires understanding, not just believing something good, but knowing why it holds. As you drift into stillness, you let go of the need to be certain. Instead, you embrace a gentler posture, not "I know," but "I'm learning." The inverted spectrum. You look at the sky. It's blue. You've always called it that. But suddenly, a strange thought arises. What if the blue you see is not the blue I see? What if, inside our minds, our colors are flipped, inverted, but we'd never know, because we both call them by the same names? My blue might look like your red. My green might feel like your purple. But since we've each learned to label these sensations consistently, we live in parallel, silent difference. This is the thought experiment known as the inverted spectrum. It asks, can two people experience the world entirely differently and never realize it? It challenges the idea that we all share the same qualia, the raw, private textures of experience. We might all say, that flower is red. But are we seeing the same thing inside? There's no way to check. I can describe red to you, but not how it feels. You can measure wavelengths, name hex codes, trace signals in the brain, but none of it touches the inner color behind your eyes. You begin to sense the enormity of subjectivity, not just in vision, but in emotion, in memory, in pain, in joy. How can I ever know what sadness feels like to you? How can you ever know what love feels like to me? The inverted spectrum doesn't offer answers. It opens a door to empathy, the realization that behind every word we share, there may be a secret world we'll never fully access. And that's okay, because even if we don't feel the same colors, we still connect through them. Even if my blue is your red, we both pause beneath the sky and feel wonder. Maybe what matters isn't sameness, but resonance. You lie back. The ceiling fades. You think of all the lives moving around you, each with their own inner palette, their own quiet songs. And somehow, the world becomes softer. Not because you've solved the mystery, but because you've started to listen. The teletransportation paradox. You step into a sleek glass chamber. A soft voice hums. Teletransportation sequence initiated. In an instant, your body will be scanned, every molecule recorded, every memory mapped. Then, you'll be disassembled, vaporized, gone. But a perfect copy of you will reappear on Mars. It will have your voice, your memories, your personality. It will believe it's you. But is it? This is the teletransportation paradox, a thought experiment that stretches your idea of identity. If a machine could copy you atom by atom and rebuild you somewhere else, did you travel or did you die? Some say yes, it's still you. If the copy thinks like you, remembers like you, and acts like you, why wouldn't it be you? But others pause. They point out the original is destroyed. What stepped out on Mars is a new being, identical but not continuous, like a clone with your mind. Would you step into that machine knowing your original body would vanish? Now the question deepens. What makes you you? Is it the structure of your body, the data of your mind, or is it something else? A thread of consciousness, a soul, a stream that must remain unbroken. If you woke up on Mars with no memory of the machine, you'd never know you were a copy. But from the outside, observers might say, the original died, and something very much like you took its place. The paradox doesn't just test sci-fi tech, it tests the idea of personal identity over time. Are you the same person you were 5 years ago? Your cells have changed, your beliefs, your habits, but the story of you continues. Still, is that continuity real? Or just an illusion stitched together by memory? Do you lie back and imagine yourself dissolving in light, reappearing somewhere new? The thought is strange, unsettling, but not without wonder. Because maybe identity isn't a fixed object. Maybe it's a process, fragile, persistent, and always in motion. And if that's true, then perhaps you're not who you were or who you will be. You're who you are becoming right now. Kafka's toxin puzzle. You receive a strange offer. A billionaire tells you, if by midnight tonight, you can honestly intend to drink a vial of toxin tomorrow, I will wire $1 million into your bank account. You don't have to drink it, just form the intention. The toxin will make you sick for a day, but it won't kill you. You consider the deal. You want the money? You can picture what you do with it, and you tell yourself, I'll intend to drink it, then just not follow through. But there's a catch. The billionaire is watching your mind, not your actions. If, at midnight, you don't truly intend to drink the toxin, you get nothing. They can tell. You must sincerely mean it. This is Kafka's toxin puzzle, a thought experiment about intention, action, and rationality. You begin to feel the tension. At midnight, knowing you'll get paid regardless of whether you drink the toxin, how can you honestly intend to go through with it? Why suffer if you've already won? And if you can't sincerely intend to drink it, you lose the money. You're trapped between two minds, the mind of tonight and the mind of tomorrow. Each is rational on its own, but in conflict, when stitched together, the puzzle raises deep questions. Can we will ourselves to believe or intend something that we know we won't act on? Is intention real if it's not followed by action? And more broadly, how much of our future behavior can we trust? Can we commit to things now that our future self will have no reason to uphold? Kafka's puzzle isn't about money or medicine. It's about how we form commitments and what it really means to mean something. You reflect on promises you've made, goals you've set, resolutions you've whispered to yourself. Were they honest intentions or hopeful performances? And you begin to see, intention is more than a thought. It's a bridge between now and later. It requires belief, integrity, sometimes even self-deception. You lie still, imagining the vial glowing on the table, $1 million in your account, and a choice that reveals the strange mechanics of the mind. Would you intend to drink the toxin? Could you? Frankfurt counterexamples. You're about to make a decision. You think carefully. You weigh your options, and you choose what feels right. You believe you acted freely, voluntarily, consciously, with reasons that made sense to you. But what if you couldn't have chosen otherwise? This is the puzzle behind Frankfurt counterexamples. Created by philosopher Harry Frankfurt, they challenge a long-held belief that moral responsibility requires the ability to do otherwise. For centuries, philosophers argued that if you're not free to choose, if you had to act as you did, then you can't be held responsible. No freedom, no blame. But Frankfurt offered a twist. Imagine a man named Jones. He's being watched by a brilliant neuroscientist. This scientist wants Jones to make a particular decision, but only if necessary. If Jones chooses differently, the scientist will intervene, using hidden technology to force the desired choice. But if Jones freely chooses the desired action on his own, the scientist never intervenes. Now, in this scenario, Jones chooses it on his own. No interference, no control. But here's the twist. He couldn't have done otherwise. Even if he tried to choose differently, he would have been stopped. Yet because he didn't try, the intervention never happened. Jones acted freely, within a closed set of possibilities. So, is he responsible? Frankfurt says yes, because what matters isn't the existence of alternatives, but the source of the choice. If the decision came from within, from your values, your reasoning, your desire, then you are morally responsible. Even if you couldn't have chosen otherwise, you pause to reflect. How often do you assume freedom means limitless options? Frankfurt invites a more subtle view. Maybe freedom is found in authenticity, not in hypothetical escape routes. You think about your own life, times you made a choice that felt inevitable, but still fully yours. Maybe your path was shaped by your history, your beliefs, your character, but you weren't coerced, you were consistent. You lie back and consider this new kind of freedom, not the freedom to do anything, but the freedom to be who you are, fully and clearly. And maybe that's the freedom that matters most. Swamp Man thought experiment. You're walking through a dense, humid swamp. The air buzzes with life. So lightning flashes in the sky, and without warning a bolt strikes. You vanish in an instant. Gone. No trace left behind. But in that same moment, by sheer coincidence, a strange miracle happens. From the swamp gases and molecules around you, an exact replica of your body forms. Atom for atom. It's identical. Same voice, same memories, same personality. It opens its eyes, takes a breath, and walks out of the swamp, thinking it's you. But, is it? This is the Swamp Man thought experiment, proposed by philosopher Donald Davidson. It questions the nature of identity, consciousness, and meaning. The Swamp Man looks like you, speaks like you, and acts like you. If your friends saw it, they wouldn't notice a difference. If it looked in the mirror, it would feel like itself, but it was never born. It has no past. It didn't learn language. It didn't grow up. It didn't live. Its memories are not earned. They're copied. Its relationships were never built. They're just there. So, is the Swamp Man really you? Davidson argued that it's not, because meaning and identity aren't just about structure. They come from history, from interaction, from real experience, over time. Without that lived context, the Swamp Man may be a perfect replica, but it's missing something essential. Others disagree. They say if the copy is indistinguishable in mind and function, then it is you in every way that matters. The paradox deepens. What makes you? Is it your memories, your biology, your relationships? Or is there something more, something woven from the path you've taken? You begin to see how fragile identity really is, how much it depends not just on the mind or body, but on origin, on history, on continuity. And maybe that's why life matters, because it's lived, not programmed, not copied, not simulated. You lie back and imagine yourself standing beside your perfect twin, birthed by the swamp, the same but not the same. And in that strange mirror, you glimpse something quiet and sacred. You are not just what you are how you became. Omelas and the suffering child. Imagine a city called Omelas. It is bright and beautiful. Its people are joyful, creative, kind. There is music in the streets, laughter in every home, no war, no poverty, no lies, a perfect world full of light. But there is a secret. Beneath the city, in a dark, windowless room, sits a single child, alone, naked, filthy, frightened. The child is never spoken to, never touched with kindness. For just enough to live, it cries, but no one answers. It suffers. And every citizen of Omelas knows, at some point in their life, each person is taken to see the child. They are told, the happiness of Omelas depends on this child's misery. If the child were ever comforted, even for a moment, the balance would break. The beauty above would vanish. This is the heart of Ursula K. Le Guin's haunting parable, the omens who walk away from Omelas. It asks not whether suffering exists, but whether happiness purchased through another's pain can ever be justified. Some in Omelas weep, they rage, but most stay. They convince themselves it's necessary, that one life is worth less than many, that the child wouldn't understand kindness now, that this is the price of paradise. But a few cannot bear it. They walk away, silently, without protest. They leave the city, never to return. No one knows where they go. You sit with this story, and it asks you a question. Without asking, would you stay in Omelas? You think about the world you live in, the comforts you enjoy, the suffering that exists elsewhere, hidden, distant, often unseen. Do you benefit from it? Do you know it? Ignore it. You realize the parable isn't fantasy. It's a mirror. Omelas is not a city. It's a choice. Not once, but every day. To look, or to look away. To justify, or to question. To stay, or to walk. You lie in stillness. The image of the child remains, not to shame you, but to awaken you. To remind you that joy and justice are not always aligned, and that sometimes the most human act is choosing to leave. The paradox of tolerance. You believe in tolerance. You believe in hearing every voice, welcoming every view, living side by side with those who think and speak and live differently than you. It feels like strength, like wisdom, like peace. But then a difficult idea enters the room. What if tolerance, taken too far, destroys itself? This is the paradox of tolerance, introduced by philosopher Karl Popper, and it presents a deep, unsettling question. Should a tolerant society tolerate the intolerant? At first, the answer feels obvious. Of course we should. That's what tolerance is. Accepting difference. But Popper warned that if a society tolerates every view, even the ones that seek to eliminate tolerance, it risks its own collapse, because the intolerant don't want to coexist. They want to dominate. They use the freedom of speech to silence others. They use the rules of fairness to erode fairness itself. They reject equality, inclusion, and dialogue. And once they gain power, they destroy the very system that allowed them in. So what then? Do we censor them? Ban them? Fight fire with fire? Popper's answer is careful. He says we must defend tolerance against intolerance, not with hate, but with strength. Not by silencing ideas, but by refusing to give platforms to those who would destroy the rights of others. You reflect on this tension. How do you draw the line between disagreeing and dismantling, between criticism and cruelty, between freedom and danger? It's not easy. And that's the point. Tolerance is not weakness. It's not letting everything pass. True tolerance requires judgment, courage, and the wisdom to know when a door must stay closed, not out of fear, but out of love for what lies behind it. You think about your own values, what you accept, what you ignore, what you allow into your conversations, your communities, your conscience, and you realize a tolerant world isn't one without boundaries. It's one that protects the space where difference can thrive without being destroyed. You lie back, eyes closed, and in that quiet space of thought, you understand. To preserve peace, sometimes you must be willing to say, no. The Chinese room. You're sitting inside a sealed room. Outside, someone slips notes through a slot. Each note is covered in symbols you don't understand. Lines and shapes drawn in elegant curves. It's Chinese. You don't speak Chinese. You don't know the language. But inside the room, you have a massive instruction manual, written in your native tongue. It tells you, step by step, exactly what to do. When you see this shape, send out that one. When you receive this pattern, respond with another. You follow the instructions perfectly. The person outside receives your responses and believes you speak fluent Chinese. But inside the room, you have no idea what's being said. You're just manipulating symbols. This is John Searle's Chinese room, a famous thought experiment in the philosophy of mind. It challenges the idea that computation equals understanding. Searle's target was artificial intelligence. He argued that even if a computer could convincingly simulate human conversation, like you in the room, it doesn't mean the machine understands. It processes, it calculates, it responds, but does it know? Searle asks us to imagine that syntax, the manipulation of symbols, is not the same as semantics, the meaning behind them. Just as you in the room don't understand Chinese, a machine that responds to input doesn't necessarily grasp what it's saying. You begin to feel the weight of the question, what does it mean to understand? Is it simply performance, responding in ways that appear thoughtful? Or is there something deeper, some internal awareness, some conscious grasp of meaning? Can a machine think? Or is it only acting like it can? And then, what about humans? Are we just biological machines running complex scripts? Or is there something more behind our eyes? You sit quietly in your own room now. You consider language, awareness, selfhood, not just how we speak, but how we feel, how we know we are alive. The Chinese room doesn't answer these questions. It doesn't need to. It simply reminds you, imitation is not the same as experience, and true understanding might still be something only the mind can touch from within. Galileo's ship. You step onto the deck of a quiet ship. Below in the cabin, the air is still. A bowl of water rests calmly on a table. A butterfly drifts lazily in the air. A sailor plays a quiet game of dice. Everything feels steady, balanced. Now imagine the ship is moving, smoothly, steadily, across the sea. But inside the cabin, you can't tell. The butterfly floats the same way. The water stays still. The dice fall just as they did before. This is Galileo's ship, a thought experiment from the 17th century, simple in image, yet revolutionary in meaning. It's not just about ships, it's about relativity. Galileo used this image to explain a radical idea. There is no absolute motion. What feels still may be moving. What appears to move may be still. The laws of physics inside a closed system don't change, whether that system is at rest or in constant motion. From within, you can't tell the difference. It was a stepping stone to what would later become Einstein's theory of relativity. But even before that, it challenged the way we think about movement, reference, and reality. You begin to reflect, how often do you judge something based on your position, without realizing you are moving? You watch clouds drift and say the sky is in motion, but perhaps it's you. You look at others and wonder why they change, but perhaps your own thoughts are shifting beneath your feet. Galileo's ship reminds you that perspective matters, that motion, truth, and understanding often depend on where you are and what you're measuring from. And it reminds you to pause before assuming the world moves around you, because maybe you're the one in motion. You lie still now, and yet your body is moving with the earth, spinning through space, orbiting the sun, traveling through a galaxy, and you feel none of it. Stillness, like motion, is relative, and truth often waits beyond the window of your own cabin. Max. Bucket. Imagine a bucket filled with water, suspended by a rope. You twist the rope tightly, then let go. The bucket spins. Slowly, the water inside begins to rotate too. At first, the surface is still, then it curves, rising up at the edges, forming a shallow bowl. The water has become concave. Now, pause. Why did that happen? This simple image, Max Bucket, comes from physicist and philosopher Ernst Mach, and it holds a strange, deep question about the nature of motion. We often say the bucket is spinning, so the water reacts. But Mach asks, spinning, relative to what? Imagine the bucket and water floating in empty space. No stars, no earth, no frame of reference at all. If everything is turning together, then how do we know it's moving? Yet the water still curves. So what is it spinning against? Max suggested something radical, that motion, especially rotation, is not absolute. It only exists in relation to the rest of the universe. If there's no external world, no cosmos to be compared to, then maybe motion becomes meaningless. And if motion is relative, then maybe inertia, the force that resists motion, is not a property of objects alone, but of their relation to everything else. This idea shook the foundations of physics, and it whispers something to the philosopher too. What if identity, truth, and meaning also depend not on what we are in isolation, but on our relation to the whole? You reflect on your own life, your feelings, your values, your choices. Are they spinning freely in space, or do they curve and shift because of invisible forces around you? Family, culture, memory, the gravity of others. You are not just a bucket, you are a surface of water, shaped by your relationship to everything else. And maybe that's not weakness, but connection. You lie still, imagining the water calming in the bucket, the spin fading, and in the silence, you feel the universe pressing softly back, not to stop you, but to remind you, you are not alone. The problem of personal identity. You close your eyes and think back to childhood. A face in a photo, a voice in memory, a hand smaller than yours, reaching for something long forgotten. That was you, wasn't it? This is the core of the problem of personal identity. A question that seems simple until you sit with it. What makes you the same person over time? Your body changes, every cell replaced. Your face, your posture, your voice, none of it exactly what it was. Your mind changes. Beliefs shift, memories fade, emotions deepen. Some of your past self's thoughts now seem alien, like someone else entirely. And yet, there's a feeling of continuity, a thread that runs from then to now. But what is that thread? Some say it's memory. You remember being that child, and memory forms a chain. But memory is flawed, fragile, partial, sometimes false. If you forget a moment, does it cease to be part of you? Others say it's the body, your physical continuity. But bodies are never the same twice. If your brain were placed in a new body, would you go with it? Still others say it's consciousness, the flow of awareness, always present, always you. But even consciousness slips during sleep, under anesthesia, in deep distraction. So then, who are you? A soul? A pattern? A story? You begin to realize, maybe identity isn't a thing you have, but something you become. Not fixed, but unfolding. Not a name or a face, but a process. A river shaped by time. You think of yourself not as a point, but as a path. And along that path are versions of you. Young, old, afraid, curious, broken, mending. Each one felt real. Each one was you. But you are not just any single moment. You are the space between them. You lie back, breathing gently. You may never know where identity begins or ends, but you can honor it as something delicate, fluid, mysterious. And perhaps, In the act of asking who you are, you become just a little more of who you are meant to be. Thought insertion. You sit quietly, and a thought appears. I should go outside. It feels like yours, familiar, a whisper from within. Now imagine the same thought arises, but it doesn't feel like it came from you. It's in your mind, yes, but alien, as if someone or something put it there. You didn't think it. It was inserted. This is the unsettling phenomenon known as thought insertion, often reported by individuals living with schizophrenia. It's more than a strange idea. It's a fracture in the boundary between self and other. Most of us take for granted that our thoughts are our own. Even if they surprise us, disturb us, or contradict us, we know we made them. They belong to us. But in thought insertion, that sense of ownership vanishes. A person may say, "That thought doesn't feel like mine," or "Someone's putting thoughts in my head," not metaphorically, but literally, with certainty. And it raises a deep philosophical question. What makes a thought yours? It's not just content. You and I could think the same sentence, word for word, but in your mind, it feels personal, integrated, rooted in your sense of I. In thought insertion, that connection breaks. The thought becomes other, even while still occurring within your own mind. Philosophers and neuroscientists have long puzzled over this. Is there a mechanism in the brain that tags thoughts as self-made? Is the self a kind of narrator, stitching thoughts into identity? And when that stitching fails, experience fragments? Or is the self not a stable thing at all, but an illusion, normally seamless, but occasionally exposed? You reflect on your own thinking. Where do your thoughts come from? Can you predict the next one? Do you make them, or do you witness them? You realize how strange it is that a voice lives in your head, and how easily we forget to question it. Thought insertion reminds us that the boundary between self and mind is not always clear. It reminds us how fragile identity can be, and how powerful it is when the mind feels like home. You rest now, surrounded by quiet thoughts, and for this moment, they are yours. The grandfather paradox. You step into a machine. It hums softly. Lights flicker. The air becomes still. Then, with a sudden shift, you're in the past, decades before your birth. Everything looks older, simpler, but this isn't a dream. You're here, and then you see him, your grandfather, young, alive, unaware, and suddenly the question strikes. What if you killed him, not out of hatred, not out of cruelty, just as an experiment? If your grandfather dies before having children, your parent is never born. And if your parent isn't born, neither are you. But if you were never born, then you could never go back in time. And if you never went back, your grandfather wouldn't be killed. So he lives, and you're born, and you go back, and the loop begins again. This is the grandfather paradox, a classic time travel dilemma that tears at the threads of logic, causality, and identity. It reveals a deep contradiction. If you change the past in a way that prevents your own existence, you create a world in which you can't make that change. So what gives? Some philosophers and physicists say the paradox proves time travel to the past is impossible, at least when it comes to changing history. Others suggest consistency constraints. The past is fixed. You can go back, but you can't alter events in a way that would undo yourself. Somehow, fate or physics will stop you. Still, others embrace the idea of parallel timelines. By changing the past, you split off a new universe where events unfold differently. Your grandfather might die in that branch, but you still came from this one. You sit with the strangeness of it all. The paradox isn't really about murder or machines. It's about the fragile web that ties cause to effect, about how delicate the chain of existence really is. You think of your own life, all the small things that had to happen, people meeting, choices made, accidents avoided, for you to be here now. It feels like a miracle. You lie back, letting time slip past you like water. The past cannot be undone. The future cannot be reached. But in this moment, you exist. And that's its own kind of time travel. Galileo's relativity thought. You're in the cabin of a ship. There are no windows, no sounds from the outside. The ship glides smoothly across calm waters. Inside, everything is still quiet and peaceful. You drop a ball, it falls straight down. You toss it in the air. It lands in your hand. A butterfly flutters gently. A cup of water stays level. Nothing inside the cabin tells you the ship is moving. And yet, it is. This is Galileo's relativity thought. A simple image with profound meaning. Galileo used it to challenge a centuries-old belief that motion could be felt, absolutely, that you could know whether you were still or moving by pure sensation. But he showed something else, that motion is relative. If you're moving at a constant speed, smooth, unchanging, you can't tell the difference from being completely still. You need a reference point, something outside the system, a landmark, a ripple, a breeze. Without it, movement becomes invisible. Galileo's insight was more than physics. It was philosophy, because it showed that truth depends on context, that what seems still to you might be flying through space to someone else, that your view is never the whole view. It's always tied to where you are and how you're looking. You begin to reflect. How many of your judgments, about others, about yourself, are based on fixed assumptions? How often do you mistake your perspective for the universal one? Galileo reminds you that being right might just mean being centered in your own frame, that others may not be wrong, they may just be seeing from a different ship. You sit quietly now, feeling the stillness of the room, but outside this world, the Earth spins at 1,000 miles per hour. The planet orbits the sun. The galaxy moves through space. You feel none of it, and yet, you are moving, always. Galileo teaches us not to trust stillness too quickly, not to assume we're anchored just because we feel grounded. The truth may be elsewhere, and that's not weakness, it's wisdom. You rest now, not in certainty, but in motion, invisible, silent, relative, and perfectly real. The two envelopes problem. Imagine you're handed two sealed envelopes. You're told that one contains twice as much money as the other, but you don't know which is which. You pick one. You feel its weight. You're allowed to open it. Inside, $100. Now comes the twist. You're offered a chance to switch envelopes. Should you? You start to reason. If this envelope has $100, then the other must have either $50 or $200. There's a 50/50th chance. So the expected value of the other envelope is $125. That's higher than what you have now. So you should switch. But wait, this logic would apply no matter what amount you saw. Even if it was $10,000, the math says you should switch. But if that's always true, shouldn't you just keep switching envelopes back and forth forever? This is the two envelopes problem, a paradox that tricks your sense of logic with a simple choice. At its core is a tension between probability and expectation, between the numbers you calculate and the reasoning behind them. The key confusion comes from assuming equal chances between the envelope having half or double your amount, regardless of what's inside. But that ignores something, the distribution of amounts before the envelopes were sealed. Not all amounts are equally likely. Some values can't be halved without creating fractions. Some values are less probable based on how the game was set up. Once you account for that, the paradox begins to soften, but its emotional grip remains, because we all know the feeling of not being sure, of second-guessing, of wondering if what we hold is enough. The two envelopes problem becomes a metaphor, not just about money, but about life. Do you stay with what you have, or risk it for what might be better? And when do your calculations stop being rational and start becoming compulsive? You close your eyes. You feel the weight of the envelope in your hand. It could hold less. It could hold more. But for now, it holds something. And sometimes choosing to hold still is the wisest move of all. The Sleeping Beauty problem. You're part of an experiment. On Sunday night, you're told the rules. A fair coin will be flipped. If it lands heads, you'll be woken up once on Monday. If it lands tails, you'll be woken up twice, once on Monday and once on Tuesday. But here's the twist. Each time you wake up, your memory of the previous awakening is erased. You won't know what day it is. You won't even know if it's the first time you've been woken up, or the second. Now imagine waking up. You open your eyes in a quiet room. You remember the experiment, but not the coin toss, not the day, just the instructions. You're asked one simple question. What is the probability that the coin landed heads? Your first instinct is 50-50. A fair coin, after all. But wait, if it landed heads, you were woken up once. If it landed tails, you were woken up twice, each time with no memory. So if you're randomly waking up and trying to guess, aren't you twice as likely to find yourself in a tails world than a heads world? Some say the correct answer is 1/3 for heads, 2/3 for tails. After all, if the experiment were repeated 1,000 times, you'd wake up twice as often in the tails case. Others argue, no, it's still 1/2. The coin flip was fair. Nothing about your memory erasure changes that. This is the Sleeping Beauty problem, a strange and slippery thought experiment about self-locating belief. How to assign probabilities when you're uncertain, not just about outcomes, but about your place in time. It pushes on what it means to reason under uncertainty, especially when your own perspective is part of the puzzle. You lie back and reflect. How often in life do you wake unsure, not just of what's true, but of where you are within it? What day is it? What version of you is thinking this thought? Beauty's dilemma reminds you, probability isn't just about external facts, it's about perspective. And sometimes, what's most uncertain is you. The problem of future generations. You sit alone, watching the horizon. The sun is warm, the trees are quiet. The world seems still, but in your mind, you're thinking of people who don't yet exist, people who haven't been born, people who might never be, but could. And with it comes a question. What do we owe to those who aren't here yet? This is the problem of future generations. An ethical puzzle that stretches beyond the present moment, beyond politics or borders, beyond even lifetimes. If we cut down forests, pollute air, warm oceans, or drain resources, the consequences may not harm us, but they may shape the world our descendants inherit. And yet those descendants don't exist. They can't vote, they can't speak, they can't protest. Do they have rights? Do we have duties? Some say yes, that morality doesn't end with the living, that to live well is to plant seeds in gardens we'll never walk through. Others say no. Why burden the present with people who aren't real? Why sacrifice comfort, jobs, or progress for someone who might never be born? But then, someone once made a choice that shaped the world you live in, a decision to preserve, to build, to care, and you're here because of it. So now the question turns inward. If future people matter, how much do they matter? As much as us? More? Less? What if helping them means hurting those alive today? It's a balance no one has solved, but it's one we live with every time we vote, buy, build, or look away. You pause and imagine a child, centuries from now. They walk through air you never breathed, drink water you never touched, read words you never wrote. But somehow, your choices shaped their world. You may never meet them, they may never know your name. But what you do now could become their sky. The problem of future generations is not just about obligation, it's about imagination. And whether we choose to extend our care beyond the circle of now, you close your eyes, and the future leans quietly in. The moral luck problem. You're driving home on a quiet night. You've had a few drinks. Not enough to feel drunk, but enough to know you shouldn't be behind the wheel. Still, the roads are empty. You take the risk. You arrive safely. Now, imagine the same drive, same decision, same car, same road, but this time, a child runs into the street. You hit the brakes. Too late. The outcome is tragedy. Two identical actions, two very different consequences. Are you equally to blame in both cases? This is the puzzle of moral luck. A problem that challenges how we assign responsibility. It asks, should the morality of your action depend on things beyond your control? In both versions of the story, you acted recklessly. You made the same decision, but in one case, no harm came. In the other, a life was lost. Should we judge you differently? Some say no. What matters is intent, not outcome. If your choices were the same, so is your guilt, or lack of it. But others say yes. We can't ignore consequences. The pain caused, the damage done, the lives affected. Even if luck played a role, the world changed, and so must our judgment. You begin to see how tangled the issue becomes. A soldier follows orders, but the mission goes wrong. A doctor makes a careful decision, but a patient dies. A parent looks away for one moment, and everything changes. Were they wrong, or just unlucky? Moral luck forces you to face the uncomfortable truth. So much of what we're blamed or praised for depends on chance. Where you were born, who raised you, what moment you acted in. And yet, society demands judgment, justice, responsibility. You breathe deeply. Perhaps the lesson isn't that blame is meaningless, but that it must be tempered with humility, that we judge with open eyes, knowing how easily we might have stood in someone else's place. You think of your own life, your near misses, your small escapes, and you whisper thanks for the luck that kept you safe. Moral luck doesn't answer everything, but it reminds you not all outcomes reflect the soul that caused them. The regress argument. You believe something. Maybe it's simple. The sky is blue. If someone asked you why, you might say, because I can see it. But what justifies that? Why trust your eyes? You might say, because they've worked before. And why believe that? Because I remember past experiences. And why trust your memory? You begin to sense a pattern. Each belief depends on another. Each justification asks for one more behind it, like dominoes stretching backward into the dark. This is the regress argument in epistemology, the study of knowledge. It asks, how do we justify a belief without falling into an infinite chain of explanations? If every belief must be justified by another, we never arrive. We keep going, forever. But if we stop somewhere, at some belief that isn't justified, then we're building on assumption. So how do we break the loop? Philosophers offer different answers. Some are foundationalists. They say the chain must rest on basic, self-evident truths, beliefs so clear or obvious that they don't need further proof, like I exist or I am thinking. Others are coherentists. They argue that beliefs form a web, supporting each other not in a straight line, but in a circle. No single foundation, just consistency among the whole. Still others accept the regress and live with the doubt. You begin to reflect. How many of your beliefs stand on rock, and how many float, tethered to other floating things? It's not a failure. It's a human condition. We build meaning the best we can, not from absolute certainty, but from trust, experience, and structure. Maybe what matters isn't finding an unshakable base, but living with care in the face of mystery. You lie back and imagine a long stairway of thought, each step resting on the one before it. You'll never reach the end, but each step teaches you something, deepens the question, refines the answer. And that too is knowledge. Not a final stone, but a journey walked with open eyes. The paradox of the ravens. You're walking through a quiet field, watching birds. Suddenly, you see a black raven. It flaps past, caws once, and disappears. You nod, thinking, all ravens are black. It's a hypothesis, one you've just confirmed again. Another black raven, another bit of support. But then, a strange idea takes flight. Imagine you're back in that field, and you see a green apple, harmless, ordinary. But according to logic, that green apple also confirms your hypothesis. Why? Because if all ravens are black is true, then everything that is not black must not be a raven. So, when you see something that's not black, and it's not a raven, you've confirmed that non-black things are not ravens. And that, logically, supports all ravens are black. This is the paradox of the ravens, or Hempel's paradox, named after philosopher Karl Hempel. It exposes a strange gap between logic and intuition. Formally, the two statements are equivalent. All ravens are black. All non-black things are non-ravens. So why does seeing a green apple feel irrelevant, while seeing a black raven feels meaningful? The paradox reveals something deep about confirmation. Not every piece of evidence carries equal weight, even if it technically supports the same idea. It also highlights the role of expectation. You're testing a claim about ravens, not apples. Your brain isn't wired to treat unrelated cases with the same seriousness. So what counts as evidence? Philosophers and scientists have debated it for decades. Some say confirmation is about relevance, not just truth, but usefulness. Others say it's about probability, how likely the observation was under different hypotheses. You pause and reflect. How many of your beliefs are supported by evidence you chose to notice, while ignoring quiet confirmations all around you? How often does your mind skip over green apples, looking only for ravens? You breathe slowly. The field is still, and somewhere in the distance, a bird rises into the air. You don't need certainty to think clearly, only the patience to see what's there, even if it's not black. The self-refuting statement. You're reading a sentence. It says, "There is no truth." At first it seems bold, radical, a rejection of absolutes. But then you pause. Something doesn't add up. If that statement is true, then it can't be true. Because if there is no truth, then that statement itself isn't true. So why believe it? But if it is true, then it contradicts itself by declaring that nothing is. You've just encountered a self-refuting statement, a sentence that defeats itself by its very structure. These kinds of statements appear simple, but they collapse under scrutiny. Like, "I cannot speak a single word." All generalizations are false. There are no absolutes. Each one undermines its own message. They're not just wrong, they're impossible, because if they're true, they must be false. And that paradox isn't just about language, it's about logic itself. Philosophers call these self-refuting or performative contradictions. The act of saying them violates their content. You're doing what you claim can't be done. You reflect on how powerful this is, because when you find a self-refuting idea, you don't need experiments or arguments. The contradiction is internal. It folds in on itself. But then, you go deeper. Some self-refuting ideas appear in everyday thought. Someone says, "We can never know anything for sure," but they say it with certainty. Someone declares, "All viewpoints are equally valid," while dismissing yours. These aren't just rhetorical traps. They reveal a tension between what we claim and what we assume when we claim it. You begin to ask yourself, how often do I say things that contradict themselves without noticing? How often do I declare doubt while standing on certainty, or speak silence while making sound? The self-refuting statement reminds you of the importance of coherence, not perfection, but alignment between your words, your thoughts, and the world. You lie still now. A sentence floats through your mind. There is no meaning, and softly, you smile. Even that thought had to mean something. The rule-following paradox. You're learning to count. 1, 2, 3, 4. You follow the rule. Add 1 each time. Simple. But now imagine someone asks, "How do you know you're following the rule correctly?" You say, "I just do what I was taught." But what if you misunderstood? What if you thought +1 meant +2 after 100. You were never told otherwise, and your past answers happened to match the usual ones until now. Are you still following the rule, or were you always doing something else? This is the heart of Wittgenstein's rule-following paradox. It's not about arithmetic, it's about meaning. You think you're applying a rule, but how do you know what the rule means? After all, any current interpretation could match many future actions, and no rule tells you exactly how to apply the rule. So what anchors meaning? Wittgenstein suggests not logic, not mental pictures, not inner certainty, but practice. Meaning lives in how we use rules, not in private definitions, but in shared behaviors, in the way a community agrees to treat plus as addition, red as a color, pain as something felt. The paradox challenges the idea that rules have clear, fixed meanings on their own. Instead, meaning is public, social, grounded in our human form of life. You pause and reflect. How many things do you think you know because you follow a rule? Language, morality, identity. But what if those rules don't stand alone? What if they only make sense because others nod when you do, smile when you speak, move the same way through the world? It's unsettling, but it's also grounding, because it means you are never alone in meaning. You lie back and think of the countless invisible agreements that make your world work. A stop sign, a handshake, a number line. Not truths written in the stars, but shared ways of seeing. And in following the rule, you also follow the path of others, not blindly, but together. Parfit's teleporter problem. You step into a teleportation pod. It scans your body, every atom, every neuron, every spark of memory, and converts you into pure information. Your original body is painlessly destroyed. In an instant, on Mars, a new body is assembled. It looks like you, thinks like you, remembers your childhood, your fears, your favorite song. To everyone watching, you have arrived. But here's the question: did you survive? This is Parfit's teleporter problem, a famous thought experiment in personal identity posed by philosopher Derek Parfit. At first glance, it seems obvious. You stepped in. You came out, just like taking a plane, but faster. But then you think again. The person on Mars is a copy, atom for atom, identical, but not built from your original matter. The original you was destroyed. So, is the person on Mars you, or just someone who thinks they are? And if it's not you, then teleportation is just death, followed by duplication. But if it is you, then what does that say about identity? That it's not about material continuity, not about having the same body, just about psychological continuity, memory, thought, consciousness. Parfit pushes further. What if the teleporter malfunctions and creates two copies? Both wake up, thinking they're you. Both remember your life. Both love your dog, hate olives, and want to call your sister. Both? Neither? Parfit argues that personal identity may not be what we think it is. It might not be all or nothing. Instead of a sharp line, it could be a matter of degree. What survives teleportation isn't a soul or a body, but a pattern, a story. And if that's true, then survival isn't about staying the same, but about preserving enough of who you were. You pause, you think of how much you've already changed, how many past selves you've shed, and yet you still feel like you. So maybe the self is not a single point, but a flowing river, sometimes continuous, sometimes interrupted, but always moving. You lie still, and somewhere on Mars, someone opens their eyes and smiles. The experience machine. Imagine a machine. Once you plug in, it gives you the perfect life, custom built from your deepest desires. You could live as a famous artist, a world leader, an adventurer. You'd feel joy, love, achievement. Everything would seem real. But it's not. The experience machine, proposed by philosopher Robert Nozick, feeds your brain a stream of flawless sensations. You don't know it's fake. You believe it all, just like a dream that never ends. Now comes the question: would you plug in? It sounds tempting. No pain, no failure, just pleasure, endlessly. But many hesitate. Why? Because while the machine gives you experiences, it doesn't make them real. You're not actually painting, or falling in love, or climbing mountains. You're floating in a tank, fed illusions. Nozick believed this proves something profound, that pleasure alone isn't enough. We want our experiences to be connected to reality. We don't just want to feel good. We want to be someone, to do something, even if it hurts, even if it's uncertain. He argued that plugging in would sever us from authenticity, from truth, from life itself. You pause and think, how different is this from the world we live in now? Do we already live inside little machines, social media, entertainment, dreams of status, feeding us curated experiences, while the world waits outside? And yet, you also wonder, what if someone's real life is filled with pain? What if the machine is the only place they feel free? Is it wrong to choose comfort over struggle? There's no easy answer, but the machine forces you to ask, what do I value more, happiness or truth, experience or reality? And what kind of life is worth living? You breathe deeply. You imagine the machine, humming softly, waiting for you, and you imagine yourself, standing outside it. Not because life is always better out here, but because it's yours. And sometimes, even pain is part of that meaning. The ship of Theseus. Imagine a ship, wooden, weathered, proudly sailing the sea. It belongs to the hero Theseus. And over the years, parts of it begin to rot, slowly, piece by piece. Every plank is replaced. First a board, then a mast, then the rudder, until one day, not a single original part remains. And now the question lingers in the salt air. Is it still the same ship? This is the ancient thought experiment, known as the ship of Theseus. A question about identity through change. If something changes gradually while preserving its function and form, does it remain the same? You might say yes. The name, the design, the spirit, it all endures. The ship's identity lives not in any one plank, but in the structure, the continuity, the story. But now imagine this: someone gathers all the discarded pieces, the original boards, and reconstructs a ship from them, exactly how it once was. Now that ship floats beside the new one, which is the real ship of Theseus, the one with continuity, or the one with original material, or maybe both, or neither. The paradox doesn't just live in ships, it lives in you. Your body has changed, your cells replaced, your thoughts evolved. You're not the same as you were 10 years ago, or even yesterday, but are you still you? You feel that you are. A thread runs through your memories, your choices, your name. But where is that thread anchored? This thought experiment ripples across time and fields, in philosophy, in biology, in personal identity, even in software and art. It asks, what defines something? Its parts, or its pattern, its material, or its meaning. And it reminds you that identity is rarely fixed. It moves, shifts, rebuilds. Just like a ship at sea, you lie still, like driftwood, on calm water. And you realize, maybe being the same isn't about freezing in place. Maybe it's about navigating change without losing direction. And maybe the ship of Theseus still sails, not because it is unchanged, but because it is remembered. Zeno's paradox. Imagine an arrow flying through the air. It cuts silently across the sky, swift and true. Now freeze time. At that instant, the arrow isn't moving. It simply occupies a single position in space. Freeze the next moment. Same result. No motion, just stillness. But if at every point in time the arrow is motionless, how does it ever move? This is one of Zeno's paradoxes, from ancient Greece. A puzzle meant to shake your understanding of motion, space, and time. Zeno presented several paradoxes, but they all share a haunting idea. Motion is impossible. Take another Achilles. The swift hero races a slow tortoise. But Zeno says Achilles will never pass it. Why? Because by the time Achilles reaches where the tortoise was, the tortoise has moved a bit ahead. And when Achilles reaches that point, the tortoise moves again. And again. An infinite number of steps. How can Achilles ever catch up? It seems absurd. We know he will pass the tortoise. We watch arrows fly. We see motion all around us. And yet, Zeno's reasoning feels airtight. The paradox works not by denying reality, but by showing the strange logic behind it. It forces a question: is motion real, or just an illusion created by our senses? Later thinkers, like Aristotle, tackled Zeno by redefining how we think about infinity. And centuries later, calculus provided a way to handle infinite steps, adding up to a finite result. Achilles can catch the tortoise, but Zeno's paradoxes still whisper something unsettling, that what we experience is not always what makes sense, that the fabric of reality might be far stranger than it appears. You reflect on your own life. Moments pass, movement happens, and yet when you slow things down, when you freeze time, you wonder, where is the motion? Where is the change? Maybe it's not in any single instant. Maybe it lives between the instants, in the flow, in the becoming. Zeno's paradox reminds you that some truths don't live in stillness, but in the space between. You breathe in and let time move again. The veil of ignorance. Close your eyes. Now imagine you are about to be born into the world, but you don't know who you'll be. Not your gender, not your race, not your wealth, intelligence, health, or family. You might be born into comfort or into pain. You might be privileged or forgotten. This is the veil of ignorance, a thought experiment by philosopher John Rawls. It asks, what kind of society would you build if you had no idea where you'd end up in it? Behind this veil, you're stripped of all self-interest. You don't get to design the world to benefit you, because you don't know who you will be. So you have to think carefully, fairly. Would you allow extreme poverty, knowing you might end up there? Would you allow oppression, knowing it could be aimed at you? Would you design a world of vast inequality, or one where even the worst off have dignity and security? Rawls believed that decisions made from behind this veil would be more just, because fairness doesn't come from luck or power. It comes from imagining yourself in anyone's shoes. And once the veil is lifted, and you're born, wherever that may be, you've agreed to a system you helped shape blindly, honestly. It's a powerful tool, not just for politics, but for empathy. You begin to look at others differently, not as strangers, but as versions of you that could have existed. You see a sick person, a refugee, a janitor, a billionaire, and wonder, what if that had been me? The veil reminds you that moral thinking requires distance from your own reflection. It challenges comfort, forces humility, and quietly asks, is the world I benefit from one I would still accept if the dice had rolled differently? You breathe deeply. For a moment you forget who you are, your name, your history, your place. You are just a soul waiting to be placed, and the world you imagine now may be the one you inherit. The problem of the criterion. You want to know what's true, not just what feels true, but what actually is. You begin by asking a simple question: what do I know? But quickly, another question arises: how do I know it? And then a deeper problem emerges to decide what's true. You need a criterion, a standard, a method, a rule for judging truth. But to choose a good criterion, you'd need to already know which things are true. And to know what's true, you'd need to already have a good criterion. You're stuck. This is the problem of the criterion, a deep puzzle from ancient epistemology, revived by philosopher Roderick Chisholm. It's a circular trap that challenges the very foundation of knowledge. Here's the dilemma. You want to answer two questions. What do we know? How do we know it? But whichever one you try to answer first depends on the other. If you try to list what you know, how do you know your list is right? Without a method. If you start with a method, how do you know it's good? Without testing it on things you're already sure of. You begin to see the loop. Some thinkers attempt to break it by choosing a starting point, a few basic beliefs or self-evident truths. But who decides what counts as basic? Others say we can only know things within systems, webs of belief that support each other, rather than resting on one firm foundation. Still others embrace skepticism, admitting maybe we don't know anything with certainty. Maybe the loop never ends. But Chisholm offers a third way. He distinguishes between methodism and particularism. He leans toward particularism. Begin with clear cases, things we're confident about, and then work backward to refine our methods. But even this doesn't fully escape the trap. You sit quietly, feeling the weight of the question, not because it has no answer, but because it shows how easily knowing slides into assuming, and how fragile truth becomes when you ask, why do I believe what I believe? You may never escape the loop, but perhaps the point is not to break it, but to walk it with care. The problem of other minds. You're sitting across from someone. They're smiling, laughing, frowning, speaking. But here's the strange truth. You have no direct access to their mind. You can't feel their pain. You can't see their thoughts. You can't know with certainty that they are conscious at all. They act like a person. But are they? This is the problem of other minds. A classic dilemma in philosophy of mind. It asks, how can I know that anyone else is truly conscious, like me? You know your own mind from the inside. You feel hunger, regret, wonder. But when you look at others, you see only behavior, only motion, sound, expression. They say they're sad. But how do you know? Maybe they've learned to act that way. Maybe they're like a robot perfectly mimicking humanity with no real experience inside. It sounds paranoid, even absurd. But logically it holds. Your belief in other minds is based not on proof, but on inference, a leap of faith. Some philosophers, like Bertrand Russell, accept this leap. They say the best explanation for others acting like they're conscious is that they are. Others, like behaviorists, argue that we should only talk about observable behavior, not inner experience at all. And some thinkers go further, questioning whether you even exist as a fixed mind or just as a bundle of experiences. You pause. You think of all the people you've loved, every handshake, every shared silence, every gaze that felt seen. Were they all projections? No, not because you can prove otherwise, but because relationship requires belief. The moment you treat others as hollow, the bridge collapses, empathy ends, and something sacred is lost. So we live with the mystery. We love, speak, and listen, not because we've solved the problem of other minds, but because we've chosen to trust. You lie back, eyes closed. Somewhere, someone is thinking about you. You'll never fully know what it's like in their mind, but maybe that's what makes connection so powerful. Two unknowable worlds, reaching across the dark. Pascal's wager. You're sitting at a table with a single decision before you: believe in God or don't. There's no proof either way. No certainty, just possibilities. And then, French philosopher Blaise Pascal offers a wager, not a proof, but a gamble. He says, if God exists and you believe, the reward is infinite, eternal joy. But if you don't believe, and God exists, the loss is infinite, eternal separation. And if God doesn't exist, whether you believe or not, your gain or loss is finite. You lived, you died, nothing more. So Pascal frames it as a bet. Believe, and if you're right, you gain infinitely. Don't believe, and if you're wrong, you lose infinitely. In terms of risk and reward, belief seems the safer choice. Pascal's wager isn't about proving God. It's about decision under uncertainty, about how to live when the stakes might be cosmic and the evidence is incomplete. But critics quickly step in. Some ask, Which God? There are many beliefs. What if you bet on the wrong one? Others say, is belief even a choice? Can you simply will yourself to believe just because it's safer? And others question the ethics. Should faith be a wager or something deeper? Still, the wager opens a door, not to certainty, but to reflection. Because behind the gamble is a deeper question. How do you live your life in the face of the unknown? Do you assume there's nothing beyond, or do you live as if there might be more? And perhaps, even beyond religion, the wager speaks to hope itself. Hope in goodness, hope in meaning, hope in something greater than what we can measure. You lie quietly and consider your own life. What have you gambled on? What have you chosen to believe? Not because it was proven, but because it offered something better. Love, justice, forgiveness, mystery. Perhaps, like Pascal, you're not betting on a God in the clouds, but on the possibility that life means more than survival. That maybe, just maybe, faith is not about knowing, but about choosing to lean toward light. The problem of induction. The sun rose today, just like it did yesterday, and the day before, and every day you can remember. So naturally, you believe it will rise tomorrow. But now pause and ask why. This is the heart of the problem of induction, raised by philosopher David Hume in the 18th century. Induction is the process of drawing general conclusions from past experiences. You've seen the sun rise 1,000 times, so you expect it again. You've dropped objects, and they've fallen, so you expect gravity to keep working. Science, learning, daily life, they all depend on induction. But Hume asks, what justifies it? Why should the past tell us anything about the future? You might say, because it always has. But that answer is itself based on past experience. It assumes the future will resemble the past, because it always has. And there lies the loop. We justify induction by using induction. It's circular. Hume wasn't denying that the sun will rise. He wasn't saying science is false. He was pointing to something deeper. Our belief in cause and effect isn't logically provable. It's a habit of thought, born from repeated experience, not from reason alone. He called this the problem of justification. We have no rational foundation for expecting nature to stay consistent, but we still expect it, because our minds are built that way. You begin to feel the ground shift. If we can't prove the future will behave like the past, then everything we know becomes less certain. Yet we live by induction every day. We board planes, boil water, make plans, trust memory. Perhaps Hume's point isn't to paralyze us with doubt, but to humble us, to remind us that even our most basic assumptions are built on something we can't fully explain. And maybe that's okay, because to live at all is to lean into uncertainty, to move forward based not on guarantees but on hopeful patterns. You watch the horizon, and though you can't prove it, you know the light will come again. The Chinese room argument. You sit alone in a locked room. In front of you is a table covered in slips of paper, each with Chinese characters written on them. You don't speak Chinese, not a word, but you have a massive instruction manual written in your native language. It tells you if you see this symbol, reply with that one. If you get this combination, send back this sequence. You follow it perfectly. Slip after slip, you push responses through a slot in the wall. Outside, a fluent Chinese speaker reads them and thinks, there's a person in there who understands me. But you don't. You're just following rules. This is the Chinese room argument, proposed by philosopher John Searle in 1980. It challenges the idea that a computer program, no matter how sophisticated, can truly understand anything. Searle was responding to strong claims in artificial intelligence that if a computer passes the Turing test, then it must be intelligent or conscious. But the Chinese room says otherwise. A machine might process inputs and outputs. It might simulate conversation. It might even appear to understand. But like you in the room, it doesn't actually know what it's saying. It has syntax, rules, patterns, structure, but no semantics, no meaning, no awareness. This argument forces a question: is intelligence just behavior, or is there something deeper, something internal, something human? Critics responded. Some said the whole system, the person plus the rulebook, does understand. Others argued that if the behavior is identical, maybe we shouldn't insist on a hidden inner life. But the Chinese room lingers, because it touches something ancient. What does it mean to think if a machine talks, writes poetry, gives advice, but has no experience, no feeling? What is it missing? And if we can't tell the difference, does the difference matter? You sit with the question, like a paper in your hand. Not everything that responds understands. Not everything that speaks knows. And sometimes, meaning is more than a message. It's the soul behind it. The Gettier problem. You've always been told knowledge is justified, true belief. To know something, 3 things must be true. You believe it. It's actually true. You have good reasons. Justification for believing it. Seems solid, clean, satisfying. But then along came Edmund Gettier. In 1963, he asked a simple question: what if you have a justified true belief by accident? Here's one of his examples, slightly adapted. You see a man in the office with a beard. You think, the man with the beard is Bob. And you know Bob usually wears a beard and works here. So you have good reasons. It turns out your belief is true. Bob is in the office today. But the man you saw wasn't Bob. It was someone else who also has a beard. So your belief was true. It was justified. But your justification had nothing to do with the actual truth. Did you really know it? Gettier's short paper shattered a long-standing idea in epistemology. He showed that justified true belief might not be enough for knowledge. That you can have all 3 ingredients and still be wrong in the way that matters most. His challenge gave birth to what's now known as the Gettier problem. Philosophers rushed to fix the definition. Some added a 4th condition: no false steps in reasoning. Others tried probabilistic approaches. Some argued that knowledge depends on luck or the absence of it. But none of the fixes have fully solved it. Gettier's problem endures because it reveals something fragile about knowledge, that even when everything appears in place, something can still be missing. You begin to look at your own beliefs. Which ones are true, but for the wrong reasons? Which ones are lucky guesses, disguised as wisdom? And how often do we confuse confidence for certainty? The Gettier problem doesn't destroy knowledge. It deepens it. It makes you more careful, more curious, more honest, because real knowing isn't just about being right. It's about why you're right. You lie still now, surrounded by thoughts you once assumed were solid, and you begin to see truth is not just a destination, it's a path, lit by reasons that truly reach it. Nietzsche's eternal recurrence. Imagine this moment, this exact breath, this heartbeat, this thought. Now imagine that you will live this moment again, not once, not twice, but forever. Every joy, every mistake, every second of boredom or pain, repeated in an endless loop, again and again exactly the same. This is eternal recurrence, one of Friedrich Nietzsche's most powerful and unsettling thought experiments. He writes, "What if a demon crept after you and said, 'You must live this life as you now live it and have lived it, once more and innumerable times more?' How would you react? Would you fall to your knees and curse the universe? Or would you rise with joy, knowing that your life is worth living again and again?" Nietzsche offers this not as a claim about physics or time, but as a moral mirror. It asks, are you living in such a way that you would be willing to live it forever? Not a perfect life, not a happy life every moment, but a life you affirm, a life that is yours. He believed this was the highest test of meaning, because if you could say yes to eternal return to every moment, even the painful ones, then you were living authentically, courageously, without illusion. But if the thought terrifies you, If you shrink from it, then perhaps you are not living as fully as you could. This isn't about guilt, it's about awakening to your choices, your habits, your values. Because each moment isn't just fleeting, it might be forever. You lie still, and the idea echoes in your mind. Would you relive today? Would you relive this silence? Nietzsche's demon doesn't punish, it offers a challenge. Live with such intensity, such truth, that you can embrace every return, not because it's perfect, but because it's yours. Because you chose it, faced it, affirmed it, and if not, then begin again, right now. The is-ought problem. You're reading a book on ethics. It says, people naturally care for their families, form communities, and protect one another. Therefore, we ought to build societies that encourage compassion and cooperation. You pause. Did you catch the leap from what is to what ought to be? This is the heart of David Hume's is-ought problem, a razor-sharp observation buried in his 18th century work on moral philosophy. Hume noticed that many thinkers describe how the world works, human nature, biology, psychology, and then suddenly jump to moral conclusions about what we should do. But he warned, you can't get an ought from an is. Describing the world, no matter how accurately, doesn't automatically tell us what's right or wrong. For example, humans are competitive. Does that mean we ought to be? Nature favors the strong. Does that make cruelty acceptable? Most people lie occasionally. Should we then approve of lying? Just because something happens, or is common, doesn't mean it's good. And yet, we do this all the time. We say things like, it's natural, or it's always been this way, as if that settles moral debate. But Hume says, slow down. Facts and values are not the same. To move from one to the other, we need a bridge, something extra, a principle, a purpose, a standard that doesn't come from observation alone. Some philosophers tried to build that bridge through reason, others through religion, others through social contracts or empathy. But the is-ought gap still hums in the background, reminding us description is not prescription. You begin to hear the gap in everyday life, in the way we excuse behavior. Boys will be boys. It's just business. That's just how the world works. And you wonder, are we mistaking reality for morality? Or using one to silence the other? You lie still, staring at the ceiling. You think about what is. You think about what should be. And in the space between them is your choice. The paradox of tolerance. Imagine a society built on tolerance. It welcomes all voices, all ideas. It believes in freedom, in open debate, in peaceful disagreement. But then something strange happens. A group appears, one that preaches intolerance. They don't believe in tolerance at all, and they're using the freedom of this society to destroy that very freedom. Now what? Do you tolerate the intolerant, or do you stop them? And in doing so, become intolerant yourself. This is the paradox of tolerance, introduced by philosopher Karl Popper in his 1945 work, The Open Society and Its Enemies. At first glance, it feels contradictory. If you're truly tolerant, shouldn't you tolerate everything? But Popper warns, unlimited tolerance leads to the end of tolerance. Because if a society tolerates every idea, even those that seek to silence, to dominate, to destroy, eventually the intolerant will gain power. And once they do, they will shut down tolerance altogether. So Popper draws a line. He says, in a tolerant society, we must reserve the right to stand against those who use tolerance as a weapon. We don't need to silence every opposing view. But when a group promotes violence, erases dialogue, or dismantles rights, we can and should defend the core of an open society, not through oppression, but through reason, resistance, and sometimes forceful protection of others. It's a delicate balance. Too much tolerance, and you invite your own destruction. Too little, and you become the thing you feared. This paradox plays out in real life, in politics, in media, online platforms, even in personal relationships. When do we engage? When do we push back? When do we say, "This ends here"? You lie still and think of all the times you stayed silent, to be polite, to be neutral, to avoid conflict, and you wonder, was my silence tolerance or surrender? Popper reminds you that true tolerance isn't weakness, it's a strength that defends itself, not out of hatred, but to keep space open for dialogue, for dissent, for dignity. You breathe in, because sometimes the most tolerant act. Moore's open question argument. What is good? It's a small word. Familiar, warm, we use it every day. Good people, good food, good intentions. But when philosophers try to define it, the ground starts to shift. Some say good means pleasurable. Others say it means desired, or what God commands, or what promotes survival. But British philosopher G.E. Moore saw a problem. He believed that no matter how you try to define good in natural terms, like pleasure, happiness, or evolution, it always leads to what he called an open question. For example, if someone says, good means pleasurable, you can still reasonably ask, yes, but is pleasure always good? That question remains open, not obviously true or false. It still makes sense to ask, which suggests that good isn't the same as pleasure. Try it with any definition. Good is what's desired. But are all desires good? Good is what maximizes survival. But is survival always good? Each time the question remains open. You don't get a final, closed answer. That's Moore's open question argument. He used it to argue that good is a simple, indefinable quality, like the color yellow. It can be recognized, but not reduced to anything else. Moore warned against what he called the naturalistic fallacy, the mistake of defining moral terms using natural properties. Just because something is a certain way doesn't mean it ought to be that way. So what's the takeaway? That morality may not be reducible. That goodness is something we understand intuitively, but can't fully capture with logic or science. It doesn't mean we give up on ethics. It means we approach it with humility. We can ask what's good, we can debate it, we can feel it, but we may never define it down to a formula. And maybe that's okay. You lie still and think of the word good, not as a conclusion, but as an invitation to reflect, to seek, to recognize, not reduce. And somewhere in that openness lies your freedom. The tragedy of the commons. Imagine a field, wide, green, shared by everyone in the village. It belongs to no one and to all. Each villager has a few cows. They graze freely on the common land, and at first it works. But then one villager adds another cow, and another, and another. Why not? More cows mean more milk, more profit. The grass still seems plentiful. Soon, others do the same. No one wants to be left behind. But then the grass wears thin. The land weakens. The field begins to collapse under the pressure of everyone acting in their own self-interest. And that's the tragedy. The tragedy of the commons, first popularized by ecologist Garrett Hardin in 1968, isn't about cows and grass. It's about shared resources, oceans, air, forests, climate, bandwidth, even public attention, and how, when individuals act purely for personal gain, everyone loses. No one wants to destroy the system, but if everyone waits for someone else to show restraint, the system collapses anyway. Hardin's insight was painful. Freedom in a shared system can lead to ruin without shared responsibility. The logic of the individual conflicts with the logic of the group, and you see it everywhere. Overfishing, pollution, spam, deforestation, misinformation, even things like over-talking in a group chat or driving during rush hour. Each action, small on its own, builds into collapse when multiplied across millions. So what's the solution? Some argue for regulation, rules, limits, enforcement. Others push for community stewardship, where shared norms and cooperation keep balance. But at its core, the tragedy reminds us of something deeper, that what benefits you in the short term might harm you in the long run through the harm it causes to others. You lie still and picture the field again. It's bare now. The cows are thin. The villagers argue. And you wonder, what if just one person had stepped back, then two, then 10? What if the field had been seen not as a place to take, but as a place to protect? Because the commons are not gone. They're all around us, and still worth saving. The dilemma of determinism. You make choices every day. What to say, what to eat, who to become. You feel free. But then comes a question that shakes that feeling. Are your choices really yours? This is the dilemma of determinism, and it cuts deep into the heart of free will. Determinism is the idea that every event, every action, every thought has a cause, that the universe unfolds like clockwork, governed by physical laws, biology, history. And if that's true, then every decision you make was already set in motion by prior causes. Your DNA, your upbringing, the arrangement of atoms. You feel like you're choosing, but maybe you're just unfolding. If determinism is true, some argue, then moral responsibility becomes an illusion. How can you be praised or blamed for something you were always going to do? But the dilemma has a second edge. Suppose determinism is false. Suppose randomness exists. Quantum chaos, unpredictable shifts. Does that make you free? Not really. Because if your actions are random, they're not chosen, they're just noise. So here's the dilemma. If determinism is true, your will is caused. If determinism is false, your will is chance. In neither case are you truly free. At least not in the way we want. Philosophers have wrestled with this for centuries. Some are hard determinists. They accept that freedom is an illusion, and ethics must adjust. Others are libertarians. They argue that free will exists, even if it defies physics. And some are compatibilists, like David Hume, who say that free will isn't about metaphysics. It's about acting according to your desires, even if those desires have causes. You lie still and think of your own choices. Some felt forced, some felt free, some still haunt you. Maybe freedom isn't absolute. Maybe it's not about escaping causality, but about understanding the kind of being you are. A being who reflects, who resists, who dreams, and maybe that reflection, however caused, is freedom enough. Heidegger's being toward death. There is a truth you carry with you at all times. It waits behind every breath, every plan, every ordinary moment. You will die, not as a possibility, but as a certainty. This isn't meant to haunt you, it's meant to wake you. For German philosopher Martin Heidegger, this truth, death, is not merely an event that happens at the end, it's a fundamental part of being itself. He called it being toward death. Most of the time, we live in what Heidegger calls inauthenticity. We distract ourselves. We follow routines. We live as they live, according to what others expect, what society says. But death pulls you out of that. It reveals something no one can do for you. No one can die your death. In that aloneness is something powerful, the call to authentic being, to realize that your life is not endless, not theoretical, not borrowed. It's yours, and it's finite. To live being toward death is not to be obsessed with dying, but to let death illuminate how you live. When you remember that time is short, the trivial fades, the false urgency, the shallow approval, the scripted path, they begin to fall away. And what remains? You, your choices, your presence. Heidegger believed that only by confronting death, not denying it, can we live fully. Death is not the opposite of life. It's what gives life its shape, its gravity, its urgency. You lie quietly, staring into the dark. You've known this truth all along, but you tuck it away, as we all do. Still, it waits, not with cruelty, but with clarity. You will not live forever. But that's not a curse. It's a gift, because now, you can decide to show up, to speak honestly, to create what only you can, to love as if it matters, because it does. And one day, this moment will be gone. But tonight, it is yours. The experience machine. Imagine a machine. It's perfect, smooth, safe. You enter it, lie down, and electrodes gently attach to your brain. From that moment forward, you'll experience whatever life you want. You can be a famous artist, a world-class athlete, deeply loved, endlessly happy. You won't know it's a simulation. It will feel real, blissful, flawless. Would you plug in? This is the thought experiment posed by philosopher Robert Nozick in 1974. He called it the experience machine, and he asked, would a life of perfect pleasure, disconnected from reality, truly satisfy us? At first, the offer seems irresistible. No more pain, no failure, no regrets. But then something inside you hesitates, because to plug in means to leave behind your real relationships, your actual experiences, your struggles, your growth, your truth. Nozick argued that we want more than pleasure. We want to be a certain kind of person, not just feel like we are. We want to live in contact with reality, even when it's hard, because reality gives our actions weight. It gives our choices meaning. It gives our lives depth. In the machine, your triumphs are programmed. Your friendships aren't real. Your courage isn't tested. You feel it all, but nothing really happened. And so many people say no, not because they crave pain, but because they crave truth. Nozick used this thought experiment to challenge hedonism, the idea that the highest good is pleasure. He believed that life is about more than just feeling good. It's about being good, doing good, becoming someone. You lie still and picture the machine again. The hum, the comfort, the offer. And then you picture your real life, the uncertainty, the ache, the effort, and yet also the connection, the beauty, the moments no simulation could ever truly copy. You realize something deep. Pleasure may be part of meaning, but it isn't meaning itself. And sometimes, it's the very imperfection of life that makes it worth living. So you choose the world, raw, real, yours. Camus's The Myth of Sisyphus. There is a man in a barren landscape. He grips a boulder with both hands, straining, pushing it up a steep hill. Muscles trembling, feet slipping, breath shallow. And just as he reaches the top, just as the task nears completion, the boulder slips. It rolls down, and he walks after it. This is Sisyphus, condemned by the gods to repeat the same task for eternity. Push the stone, watch it fall. Begin again. To philosopher Albert Camus, this myth isn't just a tale, it's a mirror. He sees in Sisyphus a symbol for human life. We strive, we build, we love, and yet death comes. Buildings crumble, meaning fades. Like the boulder, it all rolls back down. And so Camus asks a haunting question. Is life absurd? If the universe offers no clear purpose, if suffering returns again and again, if death waits at the end of every story, then why go on? Most philosophies dodge the question with illusions, religion, false hope, distraction. But Camus refuses to look away. He stares into the abyss of meaninglessness and says, we must imagine Sisyphus happy, because here is the twist. Sisyphus is not broken. He walks back down the hill consciously. He knows the task is futile, and still, he continues, with open eyes, without illusion. That is rebellion. That is freedom. Camus calls it the absurd hero, the one who lives without hope, but without despair. The one who makes meaning by living fully, even when the universe offers none. And so we return to ourselves, to our own hills, our own boulders, the quiet routines, the grief, the struggle, the things we do, knowing they won't last. But in that repetition, Camus says, there is room for dignity, for beauty, for defiance. You lie still and feel the weight of your own stone. You've pushed it before, and tomorrow you'll push it again. But maybe, just maybe, you do it not because it will save you, but because it's yours. And in that endless return, you rise. The veil of ignorance. Imagine this. You're about to be born into the world, but before you arrive, you must help design the rules of society, its laws, its rights, its structure. There's a catch. You don't know who you'll be once you're born. You might be rich or poor, male or female, able-bodied or disabled, privileged or marginalized. You might live in a palace or on the streets. You know nothing about your position. You're behind what philosopher John Rawls called the veil of ignorance. Now ask yourself, what kind of society would you build? Would you design a system that benefits only the few, knowing you might be one of the many? Would you hoard wealth and power for the top, unsure if you'll be born at the bottom? Or would you build a world that is fair, even if it means sacrifice? This is the core of Rawls' theory of justice as fairness. He believed that if people designed society from behind the veil, without knowing their future status, they would choose rules that protect the most vulnerable. They would create systems that value equality, but also allow for differences, so long as those differences benefit everyone, especially those with the least. It's not about forced sameness. It's about moral imagination, about stepping outside yourself, about asking, if I didn't know who I'd be, how would I want the world to look? The veil of ignorance is not just a thought experiment. It's a lens, a way to examine your values, your politics, your empathy. It challenges favoritism. It softens judgment. It invites compassion. Because behind the veil, we are all the same. You lie still now, reflecting on the rules you live by, the privileges you didn't earn, the struggles you didn't choose. And you wonder, if the veil were drawn again tonight, would I build a kinder world tomorrow? Perhaps that's the question Rawls wanted us to carry forward. Not just how to win the game, but how to make it fair. For everyone. Always. The paradox of the stone. Can an all-powerful being create a stone so heavy that it cannot lift it? It's a strange question. But buried in its strangeness is one of the most enduring puzzles in philosophy. The limits of power. At first glance, the question is meant to challenge the idea of omnipotence, the ability to do anything. If the answer is yes, then the being can create the stone, but can't lift it. That's something it can't do, not omnipotent. But if the answer is no, it can't create such a stone. Again, something it can't do, not omnipotent. Either way, the being seems limited, and that's the paradox. Some say the question itself is nonsense, like asking, can a square be round, or can a married bachelor exist? They argue, omnipotence doesn't include the power to do the logically impossible. A contradiction isn't a real task, it's a misuse of language. Others take it deeper. Maybe omnipotence isn't about doing everything, but about doing everything that's meaningful. And a self-defeating task, like limiting your own unlimited power, has no meaning. Still, the paradox lingers, because it whispers about something bigger. What does it mean to be limitless? Is power the ability to do anything, or the wisdom to know what shouldn't be done? Is there greatness in restraint, or only in force? And what happens when we reach the edge of language, where our words collapse into contradiction? You lie still and feel the weight of the question. The stone is not real, but the tension it carries is. It reminds you that some puzzles are not meant to be solved, but to be sat with, to stretch the mind, to humble it, to show where thought meets silence. The paradox doesn't weaken belief, it deepens it, because sometimes The most powerful thing is to dwell in mystery and trust that not all answers wear names. Acrasia, weakness of will. You know you shouldn't. You tell yourself, one more episode, one more slice, one more hour scrolling. You know you'll regret it tomorrow. And yet, you do it anyway. Why? This ancient puzzle is known as acrasia, the weakness of will. First explored by Socrates, later examined by Aristotle, it asks a simple but profound question. Why do we act against our better judgment? Socrates believed it was impossible. He thought all wrong actions came from ignorance, because if you truly knew what was best, you'd do it. But experience tells a different story. We often know what's right and still fail to act on it. Aristotle accepted this conflict. He said the Acratic person knows what is good, but their desires overpower their reason. Like someone waking from a dream, they act as if pulled by a current, only realizing their mistake when it's too late. Later philosophers saw acrasia not as a flaw of knowledge, but of willpower, a misalignment between the mind and the body, between long-term goals and short-term urges. Modern thinkers link it to temporal discounting, our tendency to favor immediate pleasure over distant rewards. You know that skipping the gym will cost you in a month, but right now, the couch is soft, the world is heavy, and tomorrow feels far away. Acrasia isn't just laziness, it's deeply human. It reveals our inner tensions between who we are and who we want to be, between knowing and becoming. You lie still and remember a choice you regret, maybe small, maybe sharp, but in that memory, there's something tender, because to feel the pull of acrasia means you care. You're not sleepwalking, you're wrestling, and that struggle, however quiet, is a sign that your values are alive. Philosophy doesn't offer a cure, only a mirror. It says notice the tension, name it, meet it with gentleness. You may falter again, that's okay. What matters is not that you're perfect, but that you return to yourself, again and again. The problem of other minds. You sit across from someone, they smile, nod, speak, cry. You see their gestures, hear their voice, watch their eyes flicker with thought. But here's the question. How do you know they're truly conscious? Not just reacting, not just programmed, not just acting like a person, but actually feeling, inside, the way you do. This is the problem of other minds. A quiet, unsettling question in philosophy of mind. You know your own thoughts, your own feelings. You live inside your mind like a lighthouse on a dark sea, but all you can see of others is the outside. You can't feel their joy. You can't enter their sadness. You observe, interpret, assume, but you never really know. Philosophers have long struggled with this. Descartes famously said, "I think, therefore I am." But he couldn't say the same for you. You might be a dream, a shadow, a trick. And in modern times, as artificial intelligence grows more advanced, the question returns. When does behavior prove consciousness? If a robot talks like a human, laughs like a human, even writes poetry, does that mean it's aware, or just simulating awareness? But the problem doesn't end with machines. It touches your closest relationships, your family, your friends, the person lying next to you. You assume they feel what you feel. But what if they don't? And yet, despite the uncertainty, you choose to believe. Not blindly, but with trust, because to deny other minds is to deny connection, compassion, love. You act as if others are conscious. You comfort them, apologize, listen, laugh, and in that shared pretending, maybe something real arises. Maybe what matters most is not proving another's mind, but meeting it. You lie still now, surrounded by silence. Somewhere out there, someone else may be thinking of you. You'll never step inside their thoughts, but their voice, their hand, their glance, that's how their mind reaches you. And you reach back, not with certainty, but with care, and maybe that's enough. Plato's third man argument. You look at a tree, a single tree, standing in the wind. Now you look at another tree, and another, different in shape, in size, in color, but somehow you still recognize them all as trees. Why? Plato believed it's because of forms, abstract, perfect ideals that exist beyond the physical world. There is the form of tree, the form of beauty, the form of justice. Everything we see is just an imperfect copy, shadows of the real thing. But then comes a puzzle, a quiet contradiction hidden in the very heart of Plato's system. It's called the third man argument, and it goes like this. Suppose you have three objects: a large horse, a large house, a large man. You say they're all large because they participate in the form of largeness. Now you have four things: the horse, the house, the man, and the form of largeness. They all share something in common. So by Plato's logic, they must participate in a higher form, a third level, and then those participate in another form. And on it goes, endlessly, an infinite ladder of forms. No grounding, no final definition. The very system meant to explain unity now creates an infinite regress. And so philosophers began to ask, do we really need abstract forms to explain categories? Or are we trying too hard to fit the world into perfect boxes? Maybe we recognize treeness, not through some ideal realm, but through experience, memory, comparison. The third man argument doesn't destroy Plato's philosophy, but it does whisper something important. Even the most beautiful ideas, when stretched too far, can break. You lie still, imagining that tree again. You don't need a form to know it's a tree. You feel its presence, its silence, its rootedness. Maybe the truth isn't always above us. Maybe it's right in front of us, seen not through abstraction, but through attention.